what's going on, guys? I'm Jason Kabinda, fullback for the Detroit Lions, and you're listening to the Roar, the UK Lions podcast.
Hi, I'm Matthew Turner. I am the host of the Roar UK Lions podcast. Have I said that like Jason? He said it wrong too. Thank you so much for joining us for episode number 53, Meet the Mockers. I'm joined with Ant, my co-host, and our regular partners, Ryan and Steve. How you doing, boys?
All good, thank you.
Very well, thank you, Matt.
Yep, thank you. Evening, guys.
Glad to have you all on. Thank you for being here. If you're watching on YouTube for the first time or on Twitch, that was Jason Kabinda, as I just mentioned. If you haven't seen it, it's up on YouTube. I talked to him with the help of everyone here. We formulated the questions. It's a fantastic interview. It's only 20 minutes long. Do give that a listen. We also have, in the interim, spoke to another former Lion this time. Boys, how do you feel that went?
I was stoked. Like I say, I was never comfortable really being on camera, the sound of my voice. I joined this podcast and like I say, just reached out to someone. You let me take the lead, and I thought, like, I was nervous, but I thought it went well.
Yeah, it was a terrific thing, and I think it somehow went better than the Kabinda interview, and I didn't think that would be possible because obviously Jason's a current Lions player, but I came away from this like, wow, what a guy. Just really excited me. So we're going to drop that probably next week. We might give you a few hints along the way. If I think of a good one in this episode, I will shout that out, or if any of you guys can think of a good hint, then by all means go for that as and when you think of it. But the focus of this episode is we're going to go through some news, as we always do at the top of the show. And then we're going to go through our own full 7-round mock drafts. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen there if you're watching live that we have got some picks already traded at the top. So you know where we've gone with that. I'm the boring one, third along from the right with no trades. Didn't think we'd go for that, but there we go. So we're going to go through those. But first, going to start on a bit of sad news. If you've seen on Twitter, Aaron Fletcher, our editor, founder, he brought us all together at the start, has announced that he is leaving us. I think I speak for everyone here by saying that I'm immensely saddened by that. There's no animosity between him and the team. It's a personal reasons thing. You know, I'll leave that to him if he wants to elaborate any further, but there's nothing particularly bad going on, I don't think. But we wish him all the best. We love him very much, and, you know, all the best for him in the future. Nothing against him coming perhaps back on the podcast as and when. That's entirely up to him. We're going to welcome him back with open arms if he wants to do that. So, do you want to add anything more, boys, about Aaron?
I'll just add the same. Obviously, we've all worked together since the very beginning, and he was the one who started the idea off, and it's morphed into this thing. You know, we've got thousands of plays, we've got hundreds of followers on Twitter, and it's all through the hard work of him as well as the rest of us that we've been able to do so. So, yeah, we do get to see him on again at some stage in the future. But yeah, thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, I'd love to see Fletch back as a guest on the pod. I was a relatively late starter compared to you guys, but he couldn't have been more welcoming when I joined. And yeah, let's get him back on the pod as a guest. Although hopefully not the week that City win the league, because he would be unbearable. But maybe the week after.
Yeah, same with Steve. I just want to carry on the hard work that he started. Let's just grow the channel, like saying, hopefully one day we'll have him back.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, okay, so let's move on to some more news then, and Lions news this time. So one former Lion has found a new home of the remaining 5. Safety Duron Harmon has been signed to a 1-year deal by the Falcons. As yet, I don't think the contract details, apart from it being a 1-year deal, have been disclosed. I can't imagine it would be for a huge amount. He started pretty well here, actually, and was one of the highest graded safeties in the league through the first half of the year. I saw him make the PFF All-Pro half-year team, and then he dropped off significantly in the second half of the year. He wasn't really particularly, for me, a fit with the team, especially because I would rather prioritise Tracy Walker. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not sad to see the back of him, especially when he looked like he gave up on one play in the second half of the year, just kind of stood there as someone ran past him. It actually reminded me, that one particular play, of Barry Sanders against the Cowboys, with the Cowboys just not knowing where he was. Duron either stopped playing or just was so bad that I just didn't want him here anymore. How about you guys?
I think you sort of hit the nail on the head there. I think this is schematically the right thing to do because obviously Tracy Walker is now into his last year of his rookie deal, and I think it's well known that free safety is where he flourishes best. And obviously Harmon came in and took that up, and Walker's form went off a cliff. So I think, give him one last chance this year, revert him into free safety. Let's get a strong safety in the draft. Give Walker a chance to ball out, get a contract here with us. But it makes sense. I was a big fan of this to start with, but you could just tell by the end he didn't care anymore, and you don't need that around the locker room.
I think the key thing is when you're coming in as a free agent, it's all about making an impact. And I just didn't really feel that Harmon made much of an impact. I didn't really feel he brought much from, the kind of form he showed for some, his previous team. And safety was one of our worst positions, probably for the last couple of years. You would expect him to come in at kind of like team captain level and really like lead from the front. And I just never felt he was going to make a play.
I agree. He was supposed to come in and bring some sort of leadership, like as a veteran presence. Like you say, he started pretty well, and
I've been kind of keeping my eye on the situation with the Vikings around Danielle Hunter, and I just get the feeling that there's something coming out of the woodwork there, and I wonder whether Griffin that's his eventual destination, depending on what happens with Danielle Hunter. But we will see. We will see.
Yeah, definitely get a similar feeling as well. All right, a little bit of news in terms of the Lions players currently on the team. Okudah and Perryman have been spotted working out together. They put a post up on social media of them one-on-one. They look quite entertaining. They both look in terrific shape. It also appears as though Goff might have worked out with Hockenson and Tyrell Williams, and Cephas was also tagged in the same post, whether he was there or not. It looks like he was. It's not entirely sure that it's Goff, but it looks like him. The throwing action looks like him, but it's a bit far away. And then there's a piece by Bleacher Report and Brent Sobleski, Sobolski? I don't know. I'll butcher that name. He suggested that the Lions wide receiver core could be the worst position group in football. So just starting off with our guys first, good thing that they're working out together, especially as it's going to be a virtual start to the off season. They need to get some of those reps in. Are we feeling positive about that?
Yeah, it can't be a bad thing. Like say, you've got to get some sort of familiarity. You've got to, when a new quarterback comes in, you've got to get that rhythm. You've just got to get that feel. You need to click, and that only comes with repetitions and catching passes. So for me, I think it's good to see it. Whoever's there, it's a positive start.
I think Stafford did something similar last off season down in Atlanta. So it's good that like Goff's kind of like taking his example and kind of leading from the front a bit.
It's not a surprise that I think Goff's gone straight for his tight end first, because we all know he loves throwing to his tight ends, doesn't he? I think Hock's probably going to have a monster year at this rate.
I bloody well hope so. If Hockenson can be used like the weapon we know he can be, I think he could break 1,000 yards. I don't see any reason why he couldn't break 1,000 yards in a season. Anyway, we'll see more on that as the off-season progresses. Worst position group in football, wide receivers for the Lions. Agree? I think that's a little harsh.
Wide receivers for the Texans.
Linebackers for the Lions.
I don't see how Texas have a better team than us. The Texans, they're worse than us in most areas.
They've got 40 free agents now, haven't they?
Yeah, they've bought a load of guys in on cheap one-year deals. They've not got much going in the way of the draft, and they're only, really big guy left in Watson's going through what he's going through in court at the minute, isn't he? He's like, their team is worse than ours, and they're the contenders to go 0-17. So I think it's unfair to call our wide receivers the worst in the division.
About the Bengals O-line, they're like bloody windbreakers.
Yeah, that's actually
they're terrible.
That's actually a great shout, that is. They killed Joe Burrow in 10 games last year.
I'd venture that the Chargers O-line has a run for it as well. Chargers O-line is worse than Bengals.
Bengals have just signed Riley Reef from the Vikings, so that will help a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing actually, which is going to keep Saul from them for me.
I mean, the Giants O-line as well, that for the first half of the season was atrocious. We kept saying it was. We could have walked in and been part of that line. It was that bad.
The Eagles wide receiver group.
That's a fitness thing, I guess, isn't it? They just can't stay healthy.
Haven't they got rid of all of their... Oh, but Jaden Rager's not exactly healthy, is he? No, you're fair. That's fair. Right, okay. Enough chatting. We're going to go through our full 7-round mock draft now, but I'm just going to take a quick interlude to talk about some of the promos that we're doing at the moment. So you might be able to see in the video behind me a Lions cap. I'm going to grab that if I can, which is here. You can win this baby. Go on to the recent tweets on the Royal Lions Twitter. You can see the conditions to get this one. I think this one is just sign up on our website. So there's a contact dialogue. It's only open to UK people because for something this small, I'm not going to post it to the States. That's not worth it. But if you're from the UK and you want to win this, enter on the website. That's nice and easy. The second one that we have going is we are giving away the shirt of the Lions' first overall pick in the draft. And the terms and conditions for that are also on our Twitter. Check our recent tweets, it'll be on there. But briefly, you have to follow us on all of our socials and then DM us with your usernames just so we can check. For both of those, that closes, I think, around the start of the draft. I can't exactly remember the dates, but you've got about a week to do that, so please do get involved. The last one that we've got going, which is run by Ryan Farden. You may not have seen him for a while on the podcast. He's more of an on-season guy rather than an off-season guy, but he runs the UK One Pride Worldwide group on Facebook, which is our sister Facebook group, I guess you would call it. And he, along with us, we're running a charity promotion for the Lions' first overall pick in the draft shirt, jersey, what have you. So if you go onto that Facebook group, it's £5 to enter. I think there's 35 entries. So obviously that's more than the cost of a jersey, but you will be supporting a Detroit-based children's charity. I think we're going to go for St. Jude's actually, but I'm not quite sure yet. But the profits from that will all be going there. We're allowed to enter it as well. And I think that Ryan Farden has already said that if he wins, he's not going to take the jersey. He's going to donate a lot to St. Jude's. So that's obviously great. If you want to get involved in that, please do get up that Facebook group. Last bit is if you would like to go onto our website, which is roarthelionsuk.com, there are some referral links in the bottom right. So that's for Fanatics and NFL Shop. You won't get anything any cheaper, I'm afraid to say. So, you know, by the by, but what you will do is support the podcast by giving us a small kickback, which would be greatly appreciated. So if you want to support the podcast and you're going to buy some merch anyway, if you click on one of those links, we would much appreciate it. Right, without further ado, we will move on with our 7-round mock drafts. So you can see from the top, and Ryan and Steve have all traded back to 9 with Denver. Ant and Ryan have done the exact same trade, apart from Ant has managed to pick up 237 as well. So he's traded 7 for 971, 152, and 237. Ryan has got 971 and 152, and Steve has gone back to 7 for 9 and 40. Personally, I think in terms of value, 9 and 40 is probably better than what the other guys have. That may be debatable, I'm not sure, but I have stood pat at 7. Thoughts before we go forward with those boys? Why did you trade down? How did the board fall at 7 so that you thought a trade down is value here, or did you not really care how the board fell? That offer was just too good, no matter who was on the board.
Well, I'll quickly start in terms of me. My 32 the other week and my 7 this week are all based on the fact that Matt Jones is going to go at 3. But I think the information we've been getting this week in regards to the Falcons is they seem like they might be in for a guy as well, especially at quarterback. So if it is top 4 go and, you know, the Falcons don't move out, then I think the Bengals and the Dolphins are going to stay where we are. So I think we become the first pressure point for that 5th guy. And teams are going to want to be there. And with Denver only been 2 behind, I think they will pay us a lot to move up those 2 spots, because that's probably a little too much what I've got from them for the the little rise in it. But I think given there's other teams who are going to be interested as well, that's why I took them for a little more there. I think it's good for us. A few more picks this year. We've got a lot of picks next year. Just gives us 2 years of solid drafting numbers and being able to build the team towards where we want to get it.
For me, it wasn't how the board fell. It was like Ant said, we've got quite a few holes, and this year we don't have that many picks. And there's a lot of value this year in the middle rounds. The top end for me could be a bit hit or miss. So I just wanted those extra picks. And I thought, well, Denver, it's looking like a quarterback's going to drop. And Denver right now with the odd man out, riding with Drew Lock. So they're going to be the most likely to bite. So I'll take whatever they offer. I think just 2 extra picks works for me.
Yeah, I think for me, the Lions draft strategy has to be about flexibility. And this is because the number 4 pick in this draft could go absolutely anywhere. So basically, you've got a situation where we know there's going to be a run on quarterbacks, probably 3 in the first 3 picks. But then you've got the Atlanta Falcons, who frankly been a mess for the last 12 months. You've got Arthur Smith coming in from Tennessee. And the question is, what are they going to do about Matt Ryan? He's 36 years old. He doesn't have much of a history of injury, but, how often have the Falcons had a number 4 pick in the last few years? And so Arthur Smith could decide Matt Ryan's his guy. And in fact, Falcons are a prime candidate to trade down because they've got a massive need on defense and they don't need to pick up 4 if they're going to pick Parsons or, one of the top edge rushers. But at the same time, someone like Trey Lance, who's really raw, only played really one full season, he could be the ideal candidate to sit behind Ryan for a couple of years, and learn in the same way as the Packers are doing with Jordan Love. So I think the Lions have got to be prepared for the number 4 pick to go lots of different ways, and that's why I was kind of anticipating a call, as it was in my draft board. 4 quarterbacks went in the first 4 places. And so I was kind of about to pick the best player on the board, but I was half expecting a call from Denver because we know that Denver need a QB as well. And if Mac Jones is still on the board, they're probably going to be adding them because they don't really want to go into the season with just Drew Lock. So that's kind of like how I was anticipating. And Denver offering their second round pick was frankly a bonus.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the best trade out there. I got the same offer as all of you did. I think the Draft Network just think it's very likely that Denver make that trade in most circumstances. I declined it, not because I thought it was the best thing to do, but because I thought it's what the Lions would do. I'm not sure that... I think a trade down might happen, but I'm not committing to it being at 7. I wouldn't be surprised if they do at 41. I didn't get a call at 41, so I didn't trade down at 41. But I think that if there's a trade down, actually that might be more likely. I think that we are devoid of impact talent at 7, and so I think they're going to be very tempted to take someone there. The only way I see a trade down happening at 7 is if there's an unexpected fall of one of the top 4 quarterbacks, and I'm not including Mac Jones in that. Mac Jones has gone up in my estimation recently. I did consider him to be a bottom of the first quarterback as recently as a couple of weeks ago. I've watched a little bit of tape. I've heard a few more thoughts from more educated minds, and I think maybe middle of the first to maybe bottom of the top 10 is perhaps appropriate for him. So it's not mad that someone might come up to 7 for him and get value there, but for me, the Lions stay at 7. I think that's just what's going to happen. Right, let's start with Ant and see who you picked with the 9th pick overall. And you went with Micah Parsons from Penn State, the linebacker. Your favourite pick, how could it have been anyone else?
Hands up if you didn't see that coming.
No, no one.
I thought there might have been a hand there. Yeah, so as I've been very, very vocal about for a long time now, you look at last season and our defense was absolutely atrocious. I mean, the worst in the league, even worse than Seattle's, that was absolutely abysmal as well. And we're in a rebuild now, and this defense is going to take a very long time to rebuild properly. And for me, we've got to start now. We've got to start adding elite pieces right away, top 10 guys right away, so we can build a functioning defense to get us into the playoffs. I think people say, oh, you can get guys later, but you do need to get those guys who are difference makers. Now, I know Parsons, he's not a popular pick at 7 or 9, but for me, at 7 maybe is a bit rich. I don't know, but going back to 9, I'd certainly be pulling the trigger on him. I mean, I feel there's a bit of a Justin Fields situation going on with Parsons. Now, I mean, there's a few things that have been working against him. First, obviously, he opted out last year. He's been out of sight, out of mind. And, you know, everyone who does that, people's opinions go down of them a little bit there, especially when you've got guys like Owusu Koromoa and Zaven Collins who've played really well this year. So you start to think, you know, is he maybe not as good as we thought he was? So, you know, there'll be a fall down in his popularity. And then there's also the argument about his position, about should you really be taking an off-ball linebacker so early? You know, you don't value it as high as you may do your quarterbacks, your offensive tackles, your wide receivers when it comes to the top picks. So people are saying, oh, we shouldn't be drafting him because he doesn't represent the value for money. But I'm going to tell it this way. In terms of, you know, out of sight, out of mind, you've got to think about other players who haven't played this year. Penei Sewell's not played this year yet. He's still consensus pick 1 in this draft pretty much for offensive tackles. Jamar Chase is consensus pick 1 for wide receivers in this draft. He didn't play this season either. Why their popularity hasn't taken a hit, but Parsons is a bit of a weird one for me. There was a lot of hype about Parsons, and just like Justin Fields, I think people are deliberately trying to knock him down, are trying to, you know, create problems with him which just don't exist. I think when it comes to the off-ball linebacker argument, you can't take one in the top 10. I think that's rubbish as well. You look back to 2018 and the Bears took Roquan Smith at 8. A year later, the Buccaneers took Devin White at pick 5. Now, if you're going to tell me that there are no Lions fans out there who would give anything to trade for one of those two now and put those in our side, you're wrong. They would love them, and that is the sort of class he is in when it comes to his skill. You know, he is one of the most elite prospects that have come through in recent memory since Luke Kuechly. And you think how he marshaled the Panthers defense for years. He served them with distinction, and he made that defense a lot better. Now, our linebacker core has been poor for years. When was the last time we had a really good linebacker? You and me were talking about it the other day, Matt. You know, you've got names like Devon Kennard, but they're long gone. And
Kennard's not in the same league. It's DeAndre Levy that's probably the last one.
Exactly. And you've got a guy who sat here in this draft right now who has the potential to be as good as one of the best linebackers we've had in recent years in Luke Kuechly. You pick him in the top 10 if he's there. It doesn't matter about the position he plays. It matters about his skill, his athletic ability, and his size. They're outstanding. His ability to blitz is phenomenal for a linebacker. That works in both the run game and the pass game. He's a day one difference maker who's going to come in and make that linebacker core so much better. He has to work on the coverage skills a little. Yes, that is true. But, you know, you've got other guys in around him. He's going to take a little bit of time to bed in with it, but he's got the athletic ability to be able to be good in coverage. It's just a simple need of training him up there. And when you've got a guy like Jamie Collins next to him, who has all the experience in the world, you know, you've got the potential of landing an absolute gem here. And, you know, we need elite guys on that defense. You don't build a good defense without elite guys, and we don't have any. So it's time to spend the first round pick on a guy. I know the off-field issues are a concern, but if Holmes and Campbell have interviewed him and feel that they can trust him to come into this side, then I will fully accept that judgment and I will fully back him when he's here. So for me, I've never made a secret of this. The defense needs this elite upgrade, and it's Parsons for me.
Any rebuttal on Parsons? Nope. No,
I think Lions fans are probably, you know, slightly, there's that trepidation after the Jared Davis experience. I think that's probably the only kind of ghost that is at the back of anyone's mind. You know, looking at, I completely agree with you, Ant. Parsons looks like an outstanding prospect.
And And this really bugged me when they started with the Jared Davis stuff. You look back to Jared Davis, he was never considered a top 10 prospect. He was never considered one of the greatest things to come through the college system since sliced bread. There is a difference, yes, in the style they play, but he's had a year off. He's been refining his techniques, making his game better. You can't just stand there and say, oh, he's Jared Davis. I think because of his off-field issues, there's just been something of a witch hunt against him. The same with Justin Fields. For some reason, people have been picking up on non-existent issues and conflating them.
So,
yeah.
I'll come in on this because I actually want to say a little bit on it first. So, in terms of other players missing time and Parsons missing time, and perhaps it not being a fair comparison, I would say this: with offensive tackle, you are playing more often not the man in front of you, or you're having to pick which man of two is perhaps blitzing, perhaps. But it's a very close quarters instinctual thing, which is not perhaps lost so easily over a short space of time. Equally with wide receiver in Chase's case, it's a bit of route running, and otherwise it's get out of your breaks quickly, run fast, keep on hold of the ball, a bit of movement horizontally, but otherwise it's not really something you lose after a year. Perhaps you don't get much better, but I don't think you regress particularly after a year out. Linebacker, on the other hand, having to sit back a little bit off the line, or if you are on the line, it's still the same problem. It's an more instinctual, more reactive game in a greater amount of space. It's something that you kind of feel a bit more with experience. And I think you saw it with Simmons last year in coverage, that it's one of those things that actually kind of, when you're at the NFL level, it hits you square in the face from day one. And I think that at the linebacker position a year out is more impactful. I don't want to say it's a lot more impactful, but I think there is a distinction to be drawn between linebackers and cornerbacks compared to offensive tackles and receivers. So I would say that to begin with, but I don't think it's a massive deal, but I think it's a small difference maker. The second aspect of Micah Parsons that worries me slightly is the coverage element of it. It's something he has to develop. He could well develop it, but developing it is projection. He could well be Luke Kuechly. But if he doesn't develop that at his worst, where is he? Where is he right now? And at the moment, he's an outside linebacker who's going to blitz in a very similar role to players we already have. And maybe he'll do that slightly better than what we have at the moment. But that's what he is very athletic, and his football IQ is not where it needs to be right now. He is very good, but he's not the elite prospect I think we're being sold. And I'm not trying to do him down too much, but I would put him in the same sort of level as Savin Collins, perhaps, in terms of ability.
I feel that's very disingenuous. You say he's got nothing that we've already got, but when do our linebackers blitz and get to quarterbacks? When do our linebackers stuff the run game? That is who he is. He's an elite run guy right now. His coverage is an issue, but he's still good in the passing game. Our linebacker core has nothing on him, and that is, I say, just very disingenuous. He's a huge upgrade, and it's just his coverage. And the athletic ability is that's the big part of your coverage. You can't train that. If you want to be a good coverage guy, you've got to be good athletically, and he's got the tools to do so. For a first-year rookie to just have to get his coverage a bit better, that is not a lot to ask. Especially when, there are other guys back there as well. Your secondary, you've got to bolster. It's the entire defense who is responsible for this. You can't expect him to come in and be fully polished on day one.
I think the point is on Jared Davis as well. We picked Jared Davis at 21. He was never going to be, one of the elite top 10 picks. And there was always going to be that riskier element taking someone at 21. But, then again, saying you look down some of the Lions linebacking picks over the years, we picked Carl Van Noy at number 40, and maybe we didn't make the best of him. But there's a whole litany of Lions linebackers that we've picked in sort of low first rounds, second, third round, and they've never really done much. So, Parsons could be the guy.
I'm not going to rule him out. I'm not saying that it's going to be a bad pick. I'm not even saying I'd be against the pick. I'm just saying that I think the prophecy of him being the best thing since sliced bread is as overblown as some people doing him down as well, which I've tried not to do too much, but I'm just giving the case against. Right. Let's move on, and we'll go to Ryan's first overall pick at number 9, which is Micah Parsons. Little
Controversial, Ryan.
Well, Ant should have stopped sooner. He took everything that I wanted to say.
Sorry, Ryan.
Look at our let's be honest, look at our linebacker room. Jelani Tavai is horrible. We shouldn't. I would cut him now. He's that bad. He's one of the most unathletic players I've ever seen. It was a huge reach. Our linebacker corner is a complete overhaul. And if right now the only thing that Parsons brings is speed, tackling nous with form, with his long arms, if he wraps up well, and the ability to stuff the run, if that's what he brings on day one, he's instantly an upgrade. He can learn the coverage, but right now he's better than half of what we got. I don't want to take him at 7, but moving back at 9, I feel slightly a little bit better taking him. Right now, this defense needs a potential elite talent on it, and he has the potential to be that. And with the regards to off-season issues, the only thing I'm going to say is look at players like Alden Smith and Flash. They have terrible issues, but they keep getting chances. Like I say, you can't write a guy off just because of some supposed rumours, so I'm not going to hold that against him, but this was an easy pick for me.
And we have in the league at the moment Ita Gross Matos, who was a part of the alleged incident, and he obviously got drafted last year. So there is a precedent for players being taken. I think he was a first-round pick last year, unless...
He was, yeah. Yes. He was in the 20s.
Yeah, so there's a precedent for players being taken. I do wonder if it will make him fall outside the top 10, but we shall see. Right.
I'll just add, from what I've seen, Micah Parsons, it looks like he's being made of a bit of a scapegoat. There's a lot of people involved. James Franklin, he seems a bit spineless. Penn State tried to cover all this up and use him as a fall guy, I feel.
It's just, for me, you can tell people have gone overboard in the criticism. Like again, I say use Justin Fields again. People just went overblown on the criticism of him, of things that didn't even exist. Just because of all the hype that was built up around him, people felt the need to somehow whack it down. And I think Parsons is part of that as well. You know, I don't want to pass on a guy like him just because people are making a fuss about it. If he's good, take him. And he is. And he will be really good.
All right. The guys don't know who I'm picking here because I made a late change to my mock draft. But my first pick is not going to be a surprise to anyone. I do not think if you've heard me before. My first pick at number 7 is Kyle Pitts. And breathing as me. Apart from Lance, this is the same way that the Detroit Lions podcast first round mock last night went. So they were left with the choice of Sewell, Lance, Jones, Parsons, and they took Sewell in that circumstance. Now I'm not left with that. I'm left with Pitts, Sewell, Jones, Parsons as my potential picks this spot. Maybe Surtain if cornerbacks are really your thing. I don't think you can double dip here, so I won't spend too much more time on that. But Pitts is the best offensive player on the board for me who is not a quarterback. And in fact, even including quarterbacks, he is the best offensive player on the board. He's the best player on the board. Line him up in the slot the whole season. Just don't even put him in line. Train him on the blocking perhaps within the season, but we need an X. Well, there's your X. And you know what? Maybe sometimes he can play a bit of Y and a bit of Z. I mean, I think this guy is just so versatile, so fast, big enough that he's going to cause players fit. So you line up Hawk and him and Tyrell, you've got 3 players 6'4" and above who run very quickly. I mean, this offense is going to cause people so many problems. And if you want to wheel out Hill as well and do 3 tight end sets near the goal line for Jamal Williams to crash up with Roll Swift, that's also going to cause some big problems too. It's not the flashy defensive player which we perhaps need. But if I look at how this team is going to win next year, and I actually want to win next year. I'm resigned to us losing next year, but I want us to win next year. Do I think one defensive player is going to turn this defense into a good enough unit that this offense can win us games? And I think the answer to that is no. But do I think that one really good offensive player is good enough to make this offense fearsome enough that it can make us competitive? And if the defense is better than expected because of the scheme, with a couple more picks in the later rounds, that we can be competitive, maybe near 500. If we're dreaming, maybe a bit better, but I don't think so. I think the offensive player actually makes a greater impact on this team because it makes it far more complete. That's my philosophy. That's why it's set. Any thoughts, boys?
I'll ask a question for you then. If you were given 2 iterations of Kyle Pitts, if you were given Kyle Pitts, we're going to draft him and we're going to turn him into a wide receiver. He's going to do a little bit of blocking, but he's primarily going to be a wide receiver. Or are we going to get Kyle Pitts, who is going to be a tight end? He's going to block. He's going to be a tight end. He's going to be like Hawk is. Would you take him if he was in that second iteration? Or would you only take him if he's in the first?
I'd only take him if he was in the first, but if you could offer me a third iteration where he could do both, that would probably be ideal. I don't want him... I know I said to just play him as a wide receiver for the year, but that's kind of just to highlight the point that he can do that, and he absolutely can do that. But if he's in the huddle, and you don't know if he's lining up in line or splitting out, it creates something else for the defense to think about. I just think that versatility is actually going to be important for him, and I think he can line up in line at X, at Y, at Z, and he'll perform well.
I mean, the precedent's there in the league already. It's George Kittle, it's Travis Kelce. It's this kind of like hybrid monster that just creates mismatches wherever they go. And you pair him with Hockenson, and there's some serious mismatch on the line of scrimmage that I think someone like Dan Campbell will absolutely love.
How often have we seen Kansas City run the play where Travis Kelce is lined up in the Z, and then motions pre-snap motion inside to the Y, and then takes a wide receiver screen? Like, that's a fundamental part of the way that Kansas City play, and it's absolutely massive for them. And I think that he could play that role very, very well, just as one highlight, example of how we could use him.
Well, how many teams ever have utilized a 2 tight end set like that, where they're both very attacking, where they both, are very efficient in the offensive game? Because we've got our Pro Bowl guy in TJ. We don't want Pitts coming in and derailing his development, because we've already got our mismatch guy. TJ knows how to pick the good matchups. He's really strong. He's really fast. He's a really good receiving option. Surely having 2 of them there, well, it won't be great, but how many teams have done that? You say Kittle, you say Kelce. They don't have another guy like that on the team, do they? They just have the one guy they go through. And that's the worry for me. I don't want to take... It's the 3rd tight end in the top 10 in 7 years as well, not to say one thing, but I feel like we're trying to big up Pitts when we've already got our own Kyle Pitts. I mean, behind Waller, Kelce, and Kittle, TJ was the best tight end in the entire league last year, in my view.
I don't think there'd be any cannibalization of snaps. Just to kind of put it into perspective, I think Hockenson took about 80% of the snaps last year. If you assume that Pitts would play 80% of the snaps as well, I'd assume that for the 20% that Hock doesn't play, that he'd play in line, and for the 60% that they're together, that you'd line Pitts out wide. So you'd have Pitts in line about a quarter of the time, and out wide about 3/4 of the time. Just quickly, in the Twitch chat, we've got Sodenad just updating us. So Ita Gross-Matos was drafted 38th overall, when we spoke about before. Darren Waller is utilised in that tight end role that we're speaking of, where there's 2, and he also points out that the Pats are out and Gronk and Hernandez to devastating effect.
One example in how many? Yeah, I mean, I get the point. I did do it with that, but it's not very often.
I was talking to a Chargers fan the other day, and talking about Anthony Lynn, and he said to me, enjoy the run game next season, and I kind of thought to myself, actually taking someone like Pitts and playing that 2 tight end set when you've got DeAndre Swift and Kerryon Johnson in the backfield, I mean, that could be absolutely massive in terms of some of the schemes that Anthony Lynn is going to run next year. So I'm kind of split, and I completely get Ant's point, around hindering the development of Hawkinson, but it's just so intriguing. A guy like Pitts, it's such an exciting question mark to have. But he's in terms of his athleticism, the guy is an absolute monster, and it could be a great pick.
You did just land on it there, though, which is another thing with me is we talk about scheme versatility. We've got Swift who can line up in the slot, who is a good running back. We've got Williams now. He's a great dual threat running back in there as well. So we already have a lot of scheme versatility with players who can get in the slot on the line and do these little bits and bobs. So that's not a need for us, I don't think. I think if you go in offensive, you go wide receiver straight out. I think if you've got two tight ends who you're trying to feed, like Hawkinson and Pitts, by the time you're done feeding them and the run game's there, what's left for the wide receivers? There's nothing. And then someone's going to get left out.
All right.
That's the thing I have with it. We have a lot of, guys who give us versatility in scheme already.
I mean, I dare say that I wouldn't mind a 5 wide receiver set that's got Tyrell, Hawk, Williams, Swift, and another, maybe Cephas. I'm not sure. Perryman, of course. I think that as a 5 wide receiver set would be fascinating. But anyway, I'm not sure that's the best, but we'll move on. So, finally, in the first round, we have Steve, and I haven't seen this, so let's have a look. Jamar Chase. Wow, fell to 9 for you. That's not...
Yeah, so first of all, after trading down to 9, I was very pleased to see Jamar Chase still on the board at number 9. And I know that there's been a few mocks that have been done recently, which, have kind of let Denver and Carolina make sort of slightly different picks than we thought. I think there's also some rumors about the Cowboys trying to trade up. So at 9 with Chase on the board, I'm very much agree with a lot of what Ant's discussed tonight around our defense, because our defense was shamefully bad last season, and has been all throughout the Patricia era, really. And I think our defense needs a lot of help. So I was quite happy to trade down. However, I think that the one thing that we must do is not set Jared Goff up to fail. I was listening to some discussion today and talk about the Lions taking Lance at 7 if he was still there, and I just thought to myself, people keep underestimating Goff and the potential that he's got. This is a guy, who has been a top pick in the draft and has gone to a Super Bowl. But what we can't do is we can't knock all the confidence out of him by not providing him with any targets. So despite my real desire to back the defense, and actually when we go through the rest of my picks, it's very much defense focused. I thought if Chase is there at 9, you have to take him. This is a guy who has the potential to kind of have a breakout season like Justin Jefferson did for the Vikings. His relative athletic score is absolutely phenomenal, 9.81. He's the second wide receiver in the class for RAS. It's only really his size. I mean, I think he's 6'2". So his size is only kind of rated as okay, but his kind of explosion, vertical, broad jump, both elite, 4.34, 40-yard. His sophomore season, I know he was playing for LSU in a season where they absolutely dominated the league. But 14 games, 84 receptions, nearly 2,000 yards, average of 21 yards per carry, 20 touchdowns. He's an absolutely fantastic route runner, a real blue chip prospect. He's got great hands. He can make the difficult catches due to his athleticism, great size and speed combo. We have to provide Goff with a blue chip target. And I think although the additions to the Lions wide receiver room, and I don't agree with the worst position in football, but the additions are all risks and all come with risks. They're all gambles. And I want to see us having a real dead cert number one target for Goff. And I think Chase is the guy.
Yeah, I think I know I've obviously said a lot about how I want to go defense first, but if we did go offense, I'd be entirely in agreement with you, and I'd want it to be Chase. And I can see a situation where if all 5 quarterbacks go early, if Atlanta stay and pick someone trades up, the Bengals have to go tackle. You know, the Dolphins, I think, will go Pitts, and the Panthers have to go tackle if they want to protect Darnold. So I think there is an opportunity of that happening. But if we're going to go offense at all, I agree with you. Chase needs to be the one if he's there. That is an absolute no-brainer for me.
I agree. Look at last year. You could argue that the Packers had a need for wide receiver. And what did they do? Went for Jordan Love. That was not a move that helped them in the long run. I think it hindered the team because they were struggling for wide receivers too. And we can't do that to Jared Goff. We can't restrict him like that. We've got to put him in the best chance to win. At the end of the day, Justin Jefferson is one of the reasons LSU won that championship. Without him and those touchdowns, they might not even get there. He is a playmaker, and he instantly becomes our wide receiver one.
Yeah, I agree. If he's there, you take him. I would struggle so much if Chase and Pitts were on the board to pick one between them. Chase is a natural wide receiver. That clearly gives him the edge. I think Pitts is the rarer of the players to come out in terms of what's available in the league. But does that mean you take him, or is it just Chase is better even if he's not rare? Just Chase. But as it is, I'm delighted with that pick, especially at 9. You trade down and get 40 as well as Chase. That's outstanding. A plus grade. Right, let's move on to round 2. And Steve, you're up again, and you have got at 40 Jayson Oweh, edge at Penn State.
So trading down. I mean, this is kind of like I really have landed on my feet here, because not only have I traded down and picked up the number 40 pick from the Broncos, but I've found that Jayson Oweh is still on the board. So Penn State guy, absolutely ridiculous relative athletic score, 9.92, which was second in the defensive end class, including an absolutely freakish 4.37 40-yard dash, which is just scary, having a man that large chasing you that quickly. I think the reason why he's still on the board at 40 is because he's so raw, but he's super exciting pass rusher, 6'5", 260 pounds. He's tested in the top 1% historically of edge rushers. He had a really strong 2019 season for Penn State. I think possibly the thing that's made him slide is the fact that he didn't record a single sack in 2020. I think he only played 7 starts, but for a guy like him playing for Penn State, not to record a single sack possibly rang some alarm bells. Whether he got double teamed or not, I don't know. But edge rusher and pass rush is a position we've talked about on the pod a lot, and the problem with our lack of pass rush in the Quinn Trisha area isn't just on the edge, it's also in our backfield, because constantly our safeties and our corners are getting absolutely torched by quarterbacks who have all the time in the world to throw the ball, and we need to be scattering quarterbacks and putting them under pressure and making them throw off balance. And when you think about how someone like Mitchell Trubisky, for goodness sake, has, thrown and racked up the yards against us, that for me isn't just, a comment on our appalling secondary, but the fact that we just cannot generate any pass rush. And for me, this is the guy that's going to do it.
The ultimate boom or bust candidate. That's all I'll say about him. His ceiling is so high, but the red flags are there for all to see. So I don't really have any more to say on him. His athleticism is excellent, but if you can't get a sack with that athleticism, that points towards your technique being poor, and that relies on good coaching. And while I hope and pray that is what we have now, I don't know.
And the the biggest thing that this new regime can do, and I know this sounds like stating the bleeding obvious, but they need to start coaching, because what we've seen is draft prospects, arrive at the Lions and just not get any better, just absolutely like stagnate. So if this guy has got this athleticism, he's the stats are phenomenal. Let's now coach him to be elite. Let's really work at him and see his development through the season, and that's what the new coaching team need to do.
I think it's going to be tough for everyone. We've mentioned on the pod this edge class is so unpredictable. I don't think there's one of them who you can sit there and say with any certainty they're going to be a huge success in the league. I think all of them have their ups and downs, and it's just trying to find the guy who will do so. But I do like Owe. I've watched a bit more tape on him than some of the others, and I think he does have the potential to be really good. So again, I wouldn't be disappointed with that if that's the way we do end up going. But yeah, the edge class is frustrating this year.
Any thoughts on Owe, Ryan?
I mocked him, I think, last week. I think I sent him to maybe the Ravens. I had him at the end of the first round. So I agree. His raw, pure athleticism, even if you add on half a second to his 40 for an official time, he still almost lit up Parsons. He was blowing him off the field with his workout. So if you add someone like that and he can turn it onto the field and get his technique right, it could be someone. It could have Danielle Hunter kind of presence, speed off of that edge. He's got the size. He just needs to get it all together. He needs to land at the right spot in the right team to use him properly.
Just a quick question aside, Steve, you know him. I call him Danielle Hunter. Am I the only one who does that, or is it Daniel? Is there a pronunciation for it? Because I keep thinking I'm the odd man out here. I say Danielle Hunter.
It's a very good question, Ant. That's a very good question, and one that I wouldn't be prepared to stake my life on.
Answers on a postcard, please. Right, let's move on to my second round pick, and it is Baron Browning, linebacker, Ohio State. And I was actually surprised he fell to us here. There's rumors he might actually go in the first, but as far ago as 2 months ago, he perhaps wasn't even a third round pick, so he's a riser for sure. A player at Ohio State who has played all three linebacker positions, hasn't really found a fit quite yet, but he's played at the Will, the Sam, and the Mike. He took the Mike job after Tough Borland had an injury. He played well there. His IQ is good, but not excellent. His athleticism is off the scale. I do not know his RAS score off the top of my head, but I believe it's in the 9.9s. Very, very high. So tall.
It's 9.98.
So yeah, probably one of the top prospects ever athletically at the linebacker position. So
Parsons scored 9.59, and Browning, he topped the class. He was the top linebacker, 9.98.
So if you want athletic in terms of explosion, physicality, as well as speed, easy guy. Browning is better in coverage than Parsons, but not quite as good a blitzer. IQ is probably similar. Tackling ability is similar for me, but Browning is available at a much later stage. This is one of the reasons why I question the value of Parsons at 7, especially 9 I can get behind. I know we've talked about Parsons already, so I'll get off Parsons. Browning is someone who needs to develop slightly as well. His issues sometimes are fundamental. His discipline to break down space is a bit hit and miss. He can overrun his blocks, but if he can put it together, if he can be coached, his ceiling is probably as high as anyone in this class. So for me, it was a no-brainer at 41. If you look at who was available on my board at the time, I actually do not remember because I can't get to the second page. Anyway, never mind about who was there at the time, but he's the best on the board for me at that position. Any thoughts on Baron Browning, boys?
I'll go first. If you ask me what do I rate higher, what do I want more from a linebacker for the Lions? Do I want to stop the run, or do I want to be better in coverage? I'm taking coverage because for years we've been feasted on by tight ends, slot receivers, running backs out the field. We have been shredded by offensive weapons like that. We have got to have a guy that can move side to side, laterally across the field, and cover these big guys. I think that is something that we've got to really consider when we're picking a linebacker. So if he's the most athletic and the best in coverage, then that makes sense for me because it's a fundamental need going across the field.
Just to say, and Sodanad on Twitch has said he also says Daniel Hunter as well.
Ah, good. I'm glad I'm not on my own. I'm pretty sure that is how you say it, but then everyone says Danielle, and I'm like, oh, I've been saying this wrong all these years?
I wouldn't want to meet him in the flesh and call him Danielle and get it wrong.
Exactly. That's why I'm going Daniil. I think it's like more macho.
Any more thoughts on Barron, or shall we move on?
I think just to say this linebacker class is really good. There's value to be found in all 3 rounds, to be fair. So I think as long as we have 1, maybe 2 guys in those first 3 rounds at linebacker, I think we can be very happy, with a number of options who are there. I think we just disagree on who the better option is.
Yeah.
But it's a good choice to have.
Yeah, so just to give you a flavour of who went where in terms of the linebackers, Jamin Davis went at 34 to the Jets. And the next one on the board was Nick Bolton at 51 to Washington, and then Jabril Cox at 63 to Kansas. So that's a flavour of the type of linebackers going in round 2. Right, let's move on to Ryan, who has gone with Kadarius Toney, wide receiver from Florida at 41.
Yep, I think if we land him here, this is his kind of range. I think this is the kind of guy that has got this. Everyone's got him kind of wrong. They think he's a gadget because he plays wide receiver. And from his career at college, he took nearly 20 snaps at running back every season. And he averaged nearly 100 yards a season rushing. So he is comfortable with the ball in his hands. I was watching videos yesterday. He's got jukes, he's got hurdles, he's got spin moves. When you get the ball in his hands, he will make things happen and he will make guys miss. The only thing he needs to learn is a bit of discipline. He needs to be told where and when. Sometimes he might have a want to do his own little thing. I think that can easily be coached out of him when he gets to the next level. But he's an extremely exciting player. And I think he plays bigger than his size. He's not that big. But I think when you make someone miss like that so openly in the field, way I look at our wide receivers is it's pretty much a given at least one of them won't be here next year, whether it's Perryman or it's Tyrell Williams. If not, maybe either of them. They're both just rentals. So I'm taking a wide receiver high because I really want to address this now and give Jared Goff a weapon that he will make the most of. Because I look at Cooper Kupp and he's a yak king. He's a yards after the catch kind of guy. He don't beat you deep. You get it in his hands and you expect him to do something.
Just like Golden Tate was. It's Golden Tate all over again.
Exactly. Like I said, I want a guy that's willing to take a screen and make someone miss. We'll block for him. We'll do what he wants. Just get out in the open field and do your job.
Golden Tate is definitely the comp. I've heard several people comp him there. But the point they make about that comp is that it's a college comp. And if you project it the same way that it projected in the NFL, Golden Tate exploded in the 3rd or 4th year of his rookie deal because he had what I talked about. I think he mocked him in the to us before, and we talked about him. Is that he sometimes doesn't know what he's doing downfield, but he's ad-libbing down the field. And Tate was like that in the early years of his deal too. Once he'd refined it, he became the elite route runner as well as Yak King here, and we saw the absolute best of him. I wonder whether with Toney that if that's true too, that you get 2 really good years a couple of years from now with him, and otherwise get a gadget player to begin with, but not projection-wise. I think he could be very, very good, but I wonder whether in year 1 he's going to be that way.
He's going to take a little work. Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, I know Toney is on the list of 6 guys who have been confirmed as having virtual meetings with the Lions so far. So he's someone who's definitely on their radar for the time being.
All right, let's move on to Ant and your 2nd round pick, which is Richie Grant at 41, safety UCF.
Yeah, another one, hands up if you didn't see this coming. I think Parsons and Grant have been the two guys I've been mocking with my first two picks since I started really looking at tape on people. So I think Richie Grant's probably one of my most favourite players in this draft, full stop, since I started studying the prospects, and I've locked him into this second round pick for a long time. The Lions safety group, I mean, this is, there are a few in the defense last year, but the Lions safety group was poor. Some would say maybe quite atrocious last year. Obviously, Harmon went off a cliff. Walker didn't develop. Will Harris, less said, the better. But what it did, it allowed teams to move freely down the field whilst rarely threatening to create turnovers, rarely, creating game-winning opportunities for us. There was an inability to read and diagnose plays, and it really hurt us. I mean, the amount of times just simple passes were made, players didn't seem to know where the pass was going. They weren't covering very well. There were so many problems in that secondary, and that, for me, is where Richie Grant comes in now. He's a 3-year starting safety with the University Central Florida Knights, I think it was he was at. So he's got a lot of experience honing his craft at the position. His modus operandi in his game is to read the quarterback. He's got a great natural instinct, and he can diagnose plays before they happen. And he's got a tremendous short burst, which allows him to put himself in positions where he can take advantage of his ability to read these plays and overcome some of the concerns about some of the lesser physical traits he may have, because he's got the mind and he's got the elite short speed. And you can see with his turnover stats at college, I mean, you just look at his stats: 189 solo tackles, 101 assisted tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, 10 interceptions, one of them been a pick six, 17 passes defended, 5 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries. He's got a run defense grade of over 90. This is how good he is at being able to have an impact in that secondary. He's one of the best safeties in this class in single high alignments deep down the field. He's got the awareness to follow the quarterback's eye, see where he's looking. He's got the acceleration capacity to break towards the throw and provide help all over the field. If the linebackers need help, if the corners need help, he can get there. And his athletic makeup also allows him to play man coverage. So there's a little bit of everything in his game there. He's fluid in space, to cover a lot of ground if he needs to. And this versatility means that he'll be able to line up in multiple spots for us. But primarily, he's been at strong safety. And if we're looking for safeties in this, we need a strong safety. We want Tracy Walker to go back to free safety to see if he can fulfill on his enormous potential that we all know he has. Line up Grant next to him. Get a senior guy in there with them, and all of a sudden our secondary becomes a lot better. And I just want a guy in that secondary who knows what the quarterback is doing and can pick him off, who can defend some of these passes, who could stop them moving down the field so freely. Now, there's a lot of good safeties in this draft, and I've watched a lot of tape on them so that I'm not completely biased in Grant's favor, and I believe he's the safety we need to be taking. Yes, he is a little older at 23, but it also means there is a bit more maturity in his game as well. And I've gone defense first. I'm going defense second. I'm starting the rebuild now. He's going to be a pivotal part of that safety group for years to come. And I really, more than anybody else in this draft, want him on the Lions next year.
You've said it all, I think. But I won't speak too much more on this. You will see why. Okay. Anyone want to say any more on Grant?
All I will say is he was a pivotal piece in UCF becoming relevant. They had that unbeaten year where everyone said they should have been national champions. They called themselves national champions. They went like 13-0, and it started on the back end. He was instrumental in that year. So he has got a winning pedigree. He's feisty.
Yeah, like him very much. All right, we'll move on to Steve's second round pick, just to round off this section. So, Steve, with 41, you selected Baron Browning. Hey.
Yeah, so I mean, just the way that it worked out with the trade with Denver, Browning's still on the board at 41. Absolute result. I think Ant's given the case for Browning. I couldn't really, add much to it. I think the only issue with Browning, which is why he's potentially still on the board at 41, is he just didn't get the opportunities at the Buckeyes. You know, I think they had a pretty elite linebacker core while he was playing for Ohio State, and he probably just didn't get the snaps that kind of made him would have stand out in terms of his production. But this is a guy that the RAS score speaks for itself. He's absolutely elite size and agility, explosive, massive potential, massive upside. So if he is still on the board at 41, we'll be crazy not to take him.
I'll be doing laps. I know we're meant to be doing the stream, but I'll be running around the house.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pint in hand screaming. It'll be great. Right, we've spoken about him before, so I'm going to move on with Ant's third round pick. And at 71, Jabril Cox, linebacker LSU.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I think I want to double down on our linebacker unit this year. And again, I've gone 3 defensive picks in the top 3. Probably one of the only Lions fans who's done this, but I do believe that the rebuilding job is so that we need to get a good chunk of it done this year, especially when we have the linebacker depth we do in this one. So, I mean, Jabril Cox, for me, is he going to slip this far? I know you said in your mock he didn't fall that far. He went to 63.
Yeah.
But for me, in terms of there is areas of concern around his run defense, which may make him slide. I think I'm only 8 spots behind, so I think the odds of him still being there at 71 are good. But I mean, this is another guy he's had a really good year last year. He only played 10 games. He got 58 combined tackles, 6.5 for a loss, a sack, 3 interceptions. 1 was returned for a pick 6, 5 passes defended, fumble recovery. For me, if you add in 2 guys like Parsons and Cox alongside the senior leadership that Jamie Collins provides, you're completely renovating your linebacker unit from one of the worst to potentially one of the best in the league. We've got Anzalone in as well, who's trying to prove himself in a contract year. You've got Tavai. I know there's a lot of people who think he's dumb, but if he's just going to be a rotational guy used in more favorable situations, then suddenly you've got some good competition for places. You've got some depth to work with. But in terms of Cox himself, he's terrific in man and zone coverage. It makes him an ideal matchup guy that can handle tight ends, running backs, slot receivers. We know Campbell likes his guys who can do multiple matchups and do them well. He's got terrific range, mobility. His motor's always running. He just runs all over the field and he keeps it going. As has been said, the run defense is an area of concern, but if the draft lands the way it has for me, Parsons and Grant are both elite at that. So you can exploit Cox's coverage skills whilst using guys like Grant and Parsons to stuff the run, because we're going to need run stuffers next year. But that is, again, something he can develop over time. So, you've got 2 guys there I've drafted. One is great at blitzing, one's great at coverage. They will both become great over time. I just love Jabril Cox, and at 71, I think he'd be an absolute steal. And then all of a sudden, we've got a massive base for our defense for years to come with those 3 guys. And I don't think I'm alone in my mocking him at this spot, because I think he's got a lot of admirers. There'll be a lot of teams interested in him. I hope it's us. And if we get him in the 3rd, I'll be doing cartwheels if we get the first 2 as well.
Ryan, I know you're a big Cox fan.
Yep. He is. I have picked him too. I wanted to go before him because, well, oh God, this is going to sound worse. I wanted to gush about Cox and how bad that sounds too. But no, we might as well just say I picked him too at 71. This guy is phenomenal. 9 career interceptions for 250 yards and 3 pick sixes with 26 career passes defended. 3 national championships. How many people enter the transfer portal from an FCS team and walk into an LSU team that's just won a national championship? I will tell you, no one will do that. That is phenomenal how highly they rated him. He's lost, I think, like 1 career game. He is a born winner and he's a leader among men. I took Parsons in the 1st round. That is the run defense side. Now this is my coverage guy. And if we get him, I'll be lost for words if we get him at this far. I'll be delighted.
Yeah,
He's
71.
the pick I love.
71 would be a steal. Any thoughts on Cox, Steve?
I think I've got no issues for Cox. I think the only thing I want to pick up with Ant was describing, Tavares, using him rotationally. I would use him rotationally. One week I'd let him do the hot dog stand. The next week maybe like out in the car park, maybe like the club shop. I wouldn't let him like handle any cash. Maybe like folding shirts. So I think that's my rotational plan for Tavai.
All right, hang on here. Matt will back me on this. He did get a bit better after Patricia, and I'm not saying he's not, but with a lot of the guys, he just didn't look like he knew what he was doing a lot of the time. But that was down to Patricia's stupid insistence on players playing everywhere. I need my rotational guys who can play 10 different positions, doing all these different jobs. At least when he was gone, he looked better, and I think you would see it on tape. Not great. I'm not making a case saying he's going to be a starter for years, but if he's linebacker 5 and we're just bringing him in situations where we can use him a little bit to his strengths, I think there's a niche for him there. Maybe a little bit like what Jared Davis did, but obviously we didn't spend a first rounder on him.
He is indeed niche.
He is, and I don't think he's going to make it here in the long run, but I do think there is a little, especially as a rotational guy, there are areas where he will benefit us, even just a little bit.
Yeah, me and Ant were both on this train during the season. He did show noticeable improvement. I mean, his floor was pretty low, so the only way to go was up. But for a guy that slow, asking him to do multiple things was not particularly fair. And when you asked him to do one thing, he did it okay. I think that if he played to that standard, he could be the linebacker 5, but the problem with him is that he offers no special teams ability at that level. As a rotational linebacker or a backup linebacker, you'd like him to be able to play on special teams. Someone like Mike Ford is kind of fulfilling that role as a cornerback and being the starting gunner. So I think he's going to struggle to make the team based purely on special teams, but we'll see. Sodan on the chat has just said, I think he's kind of fulfilling the Aaron role, which has been slightly vacated, and he just said Cox and Penasini on the same defense. I will move swiftly on and move on to Ryan's first third round pick, which is Jabril Cox. How did you do that?
I basically said I might as well talk about it now. Like you say, I took him. I don't know if you want to move on to my next one because I've got an extra third round.
You did.
I just want to say, great minds think alike, Ryan.
Right, let's go on to your second third round pick as well then. So let's have a look. At 72, Divine Diablo, safety, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, this guy is going to be one of the next great linebacker hybrid safeties. He had a brilliant year in 2020. He registered 4 interceptions as well as another 60 tackles, multiple forced fumbles, no sacks, but this guy, he hits like a tow truck. He comes downhill hard. I feel like in the right scheme, I don't know, like maybe like a Buda Baker, he comes down really fast, but he's willing to drop back as well and do some of the dirty work. He's got great ball skills. He's got multiple interceptions in his career in most seasons. And I just think he is in a really gritty defense. He plays in the AAC with Virginia Tech. He is accustomed to hard football. He tackles well. He completes them and he drives through them. Like he was given the name like the devil and then like divine. Like how could you not draft a guy with a name like that? It's going to look brilliant and sound brilliant when you're calling it week in, week out. He's going to be a playmaker in the secondary. I guarantee he's going to be a starting safety.
I must confess I haven't watched a huge amount of Divine Diablo. It's a name that you're not ever going to miss. I recognise it. I've seen him on the boards. I've seen him mentioned very favourably, but it's not someone I've taken a huge amount of notice at. Anyone else?
I think Ryan's covered him pretty thoroughly there. Diablo is a very good safety prospect, and I think that's another one of the classes. There are a lot of safeties we could take who would instantly benefit us in this class. It's a very good class, and if you go in third round, if we don't go second, if we go with him in the third, I think he provides great value and would be, he would ease the pain if we didn't draft Grant. So
3 defensive picks in the first 4 as well for Ryan. So he didn't match your first 3 being defense, but he's going heavily that way. Right. My first third round pick is at 72, Richie Grant, safety, UCF. And I cannot believe he's fallen this far, but if he falls this far, he's going to be the best player on the board. He just is. For the reasons that have been stated, you can take him at 41. Now, if you have a look at where some of the predictive boards have him, that is a slight reach. Perhaps he's slated to perhaps go in the early 50s, mid 50s, maybe the late 50s at a push. At 72, he's an absolute steal for the reasons already discussed by Ant. I will not labour the point. Moving on to Steve's first third round pick. And that was...
At number 72.
Richie Grant. How about it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with anything Ant said earlier on Grant, other than maybe he's just taken him a bit early, you know, in the 40s, considering the depth of the safety group. I think my penny drop moment came during the Super Bowl, because this season with our defense, I've cursed out our defensive line, I've cursed out our linebacker core, I've cursed out our corners on multiple occasions, but probably the safeties have gone a bit under the radar for me in terms of their awfulness. And then watching the Super Bowl, and you've got Antoine Winfield Jr. on one side of the ball and Tyrann Mathieu on the other, and you just thinking to yourself all the time you're watching the game, one of these guys is going to make a play. One of these guys is going to make a play at any moment. The potential for a game-changing moment is just always there with those two. And so many games with the Lions, I've just been waiting for someone to do something. Please, can someone make a play, force a fumble, make a pick? And this is where I think the safety group is so lacking, because you just never expect anything from them. You know, if anything happens with our safeties, it's just a bonus, but there's never any real expectation that they're going to do anything. And Grant, as Ant said, is an absolute ball hawk, is a playmaker. His RAS wasn't that great. He was 7.8, which was 11th in the class. But, just look at his stats, look at his numbers, 10 interceptions, 17 pass breakups. He's pretty quick, 4.49 40-yard dash. So, this guy is someone who is going to make an impact. I think he's played all 4 seasons. And for me, this is absolutely the kind of person that we need in our defense, someone to make something happen.
I think one of my main concerns with Richie Grant that I take actually from more of the draft analysts rather than something I've seen on tape is that although he's played a variety of positions, that they all seem to project him as a starting free safety. Despite the fact he's played in the box, despite the fact he's played the strong safety role or kind of a variety of other roles, they all say that is more of his natural fit, and I wonder if there is some slight positional redundancy, whether we kind of try and shoehorn him into the strong safety role, which he can fill, but perhaps is not his natural role. That remains to be seen, because he's obviously played everywhere and he's done it well, so we'll see. But that is a minor drawback that I will highlight. Anyway, we'll move on with Steve's second third round pick, which is Robert Rochelle, cornerback, Central Arkansas, at 101.
Yeah, so Rochelle at 101, just as a kind of precursor, I want to say I really, really want Jeff Okudah to have a fantastic season this year. I think the guy has been really up against it. The number 3 pick, that instant expectation to completely rejuvenate our offense. And, we kind of set him up to fail in terms of we didn't generate any pass rush. We gave opposing quarterbacks an eternity to throw the ball. Okudah got burned time and time again. And then we found out that actually he'd come to the Lions injured, never really kind of was fully healthy, and ended up having to have, I think, an operation towards the end of the season. So you kind of really feel for the guy. He's had a really rough opening season. But I think that in terms of the corner position, we need to add some more depth. We need to make sure that we're not just relying on Akuda coming back and having this amazing sophomore season. And Rochelle's kind of the guy, he can run 441. His OAS score was 9.65, which was 8th for the cornerback class. He's got real arm length. He checks every box in terms of his ability to read the game. Apparently, he came to college as a running back and a receiver, and then I think he sort of kind of somehow emerged as a corner. I'm not really sure of the story. So I think he's quite raw in his position, but in terms of his ability and talent, I think he could be a kind of reach for the Lions, but one that could pay off. I think the only question mark was apparently he was listed as 6'2" on his college website, but was only measured at 5'11", which is a little embarrassing. So maybe that's why there's been a bit of a question mark over him, but this could be a great acquisition for the Lions.
I think the thing with something like height, and it's something that I point out with the wide receiver 4, whose name escapes me now, Bateman, who was listed 2 inches lower, is if someone's listed at a height and he doesn't play to that height, it's immediately obvious. Questions asked. If you're playing to the height and then he's listed at lower than that height, it just means he's playing bigger than he's listed, right? So that sort of thing isn't a question mark for me, unless it was something which was highlighted prior to his pro day, which I don't think it was in Rochelle's case. So that's not an issue for me. I think this is a very shrewd pick here. It might be a reach in terms of where he might be drafted by someone else, but in terms of his potential upside, I think there's potential value there at 101.
If I remember rightly, I think 2 years ago, he led the nation, I think, with 7 interceptions. It was between 7 and 9. He was the leading player in the country, FCS and FBS, I think it was. So he puts himself in positions to win the ball. He's got good hands and a good IQ. So he's a finisher of players. So turnovers make your height redundant for me.
All right. Any more thoughts on Rochelle, or should we move on?
I've got him in a bit, I think, so I'll talk about him then.
All right. My second third round pick, then my last third round pick, is at 101, Quincy Roche, edge from Miami. Now, he's probably the third Miami edge that you might consider. There's obviously Phillips and Rousseau, who obviously didn't play in 2020. And this might be a reach at first look. However, I think he is actually much better than first listed. Now, Roche started and had 3 seasons at Temple. He had AAC Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. And not content with that, he went as a grad transfer to Miami for the 2020 season because he's the sort of guy, personality-wise, who's going to seek out a challenge. And in terms of personality, I think that's a really big plus for him. Now, his production did fall against better competition. However, partially, that is because he was playing alongside Jaden Phillips, who was played almost exclusively at left end. So that meant that Roche was playing exclusively at right end for the majority of snaps, playing against the more athletic tackles at left tackle in college, which hurt his production compared to some of the other edge players who were moving around the position, moving from left to right and inside and what have you. So I think his production was stunted slightly by playing alongside Phillips, who was exclusively played at left end. Now, Roche probably is going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker because he is slightly undersized. However, if we are going to be playing a 3-4 base scheme, him being an outside linebacker probably suits our scheme. He is a very quick processor. He's got great vision. He lines up at 5, 7, and 9 technique. He keeps working to the ball. He's got good speed and bends. Even when he's being held up by the tackle, he keeps those legs pumping. And that is something that you like to see from someone who doesn't let himself get held up. His pass rush technique needs a little bit of work. He, when I looked at his tape, seemed to try the swim move in pretty much every rep, and I think that the better NFL tackles are going to see through that pretty quickly. But I looked at the position I'd left us here, and I've taken Pitts, Browning, and Grant to this point, and I'm thinking I could use some depth somewhere on that defensive line. I looked at what was available there, and I thought he was the best of the bunch in terms of adding what was there. I'm not convinced it's a perfect pick at this point, but I'm content with Browning and Grant that Roche's going to add a little bit of something which is perhaps what we're hoping Julian Okwara is going to be, but as yet, obviously, we haven't seen that yet, and I hope that Okwara can facilitate that, but I want to take another swing at edge. Any thoughts on Roche, boys?
Did you say he's part of the triumvirate of Miami edge rushers this year, isn't he?
Yeah.
And that was odd, because you said he's maybe a reach there, but I'd not seen any of... certainly two of them are very high up the board, but I'd seen none of them outside the top 100 at all. I feel like that's pretty good value if I'm reading.
So, in terms of the predictive board from the Draft Network, he was in the late 80s, already 90s, but on my consensus board, which takes into account Pro Football Network, Pro Football Focus, and Tankathon as well as them, he is at 139. So, it depends where you look. He might be a reach on some. He's value on TDN's board. By my eyes, he's value, but it's marginal. He might well be just picked exactly where he should be there.
I don't know. As we said, I think any edge is a gamble this year, so you've got to just see the good in the game, and hopefully, like I say, you get the one who comes good. So, but I think that's pretty good value. To be fair, I would not say that was a reach.
We've got a question from Sodanad if we finished with Roche, and I think we have. And he said, read the Rochelle pick, so I'm going to direct this at Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Does this make the Quinton Dunbar signing redundant, as it seems he was signed to be the Okuda insurance policy?
I think like several of the players, Dunbar is a one-year prover, and that doesn't mean to say that we can't draft someone who's going to learn from veterans. We need to have a veteran group of players, an experienced group of players that are going to help these young guys. And if they work out and they gel, there's no reason why they all can't play, because in this league, you're up against Aaron Rodgers, you're up against Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. You're going to need three corners on the field for a lot of the time.
Don't tell me you put Cousins in that group.
Well, Cousins, when he's on his game and throwing the ball a lot, Jefferson, he's targeted him and he's thrown a lot to Jefferson, and they're going to be a threat, the Vikings, because they are going to come back. But we need to have a really strong and deep corner group, and corners get banged up really easily. They make a lot of tackles at high velocity, so I wouldn't be unhappy if we had four really good corners.
At the risk of running out of things to say when I talk about him in a bit, the way I looked at the corner situation, and I agree with you, Steve, you've got Elder and Dunbar as your senior guys now. They are improve-it deals, but they're the guys who you might expect to start first game next season. And then underneath, you've got Oruwariye, you've got Okuda, the two incredibly talented guys with a lot of potential who hopefully will develop with Dunbar and Elder there. And I think that, Rochelle coming in, I think that's a good thing, because they said he's a high ceiling prospect, and I think there's room for him. Now we've got our two senior guys and our two incredibly talented guys. There is room for a Robert Rochelle under that, just sort of let's see what happens with him guy, but a lot of potential again to give us even more depth going forward. So I think if you can take a flyer anywhere on the defense, it's corner with the guys we've got now. So yeah. I think there's a position for him for sure.
All right, we'll move on to let's do Ant's second, third round pick. So that is Jalen Darden at 7'2", wide receiver from North Texas.
So I think a lot of the guys I've got on my mock drafts. I've spoken about them probably a lot at length. We did the pro day episodes. I think most of them featured in that. But for me, Jalen Darden is an example of how you don't need to spend big to get a great receiver in this draft. And, I think he's a good example of that. So just to put into account his college career, he's played for North Texas Mean Green, got 47 games, 230 receptions, 2,782 yards. The high bin last year when he got 1,190. He's got 38 touchdowns, averages over 12 yards per reception, and his receiving grade last year was just 0.1 underneath 90. He had an amazing year. And to top that off, he became a consensus All-American guy, and he's the first player from his college since the founder of the program, Mean Joe Green, back in 1968. He's broken all the records, the receiving records at that college. And for me, what I like about him is his determination, because he's a small guy. But as I've said on our Pro Day pods, when I talked about him and Eskridge at length, when they're smaller, they have more to prove. They have a chip on the shoulder. They've got to work harder. They've got to play harder. They've got to show that they belong in the NFL, and that just makes them so dangerous. I mean, in terms of Darden's case, he's dynamic. He's an explosive threat with the football in his hands. Teams might be put off on his stature, but that means he's just going to fall to a level where you're going to get a really good deal for him. His vertical receiving skills and his ability to generate yards after the catch, you can't overlook that, because he's so slippery when he's got the ball in his hands. Now, you'd need to play him in a bit more of a spread offense that spaces the field out a bit and minimizes the congestion. But we've got a lot of guys in the interior. You've got Hockenson, you've got Swift, you've got Williams, guys you can play in there. You can play him out wide and give him a bit of space. He can work screens, bubbles, outbreaking routes. You can target him vertically down the field. And as a bonus, you've got 2 years of primary punt return duties as well. So he can play special teams, and he can be an instant starter. Well, maybe instant starter soon enough, given a few games just to adapt to the league. But he's a natural at making guys miss. I talked about the documentary they did about him on YouTube, The Shiftiest Player in College Football, which was him. And he came out with a great quote saying, making someone miss is like waking up in the morning and brushing my teeth. I got to do it every day. He's a guy who has a point to prove. He's a natural at making defenders miss. And I saw the article the other day about how the Lions didn't force hardly any missed tackles yesterday. I think Swift was the leader in missed tackles, and it wasn't very high. You need guys who can make defenders miss, who give the team depth, who help create explosive plays down the field. And I've just looked at so much of his tape. I've seen the speed, I've seen the awareness, waiting for the ball to come into his hands before turning his head and going. He's tough, he's tenacious on screen passes. He'll bulldoze into safeties and cornerbacks. He won't back down from them, but his movement is the most impressive thing about him. If a DB catches him, he'll break out wide, he'll cut up the line. He's so hard to cover, and that means that teams have to start, they have to back off him a little bit. They have to bring in safety help. He really makes teams think, and to have an offensive weapon like him on your side, if you feed him right, Dan Campbell talks about mismatched guys, putting your best guys on their worst. He's a nightmare for teams to plan for, and you don't need to spend a first round pick on him. You can get him in the third. I don't think he's a reach. I think he's a great player, and I love to have him here. So yeah, Jalen Darden for me, he's going to be my first receiver in this draft, but I think he's a tremendous prospect, and I think he's going to be a really good player. So yeah, I really like him.
Any thoughts on Jalen Darden, boys?
Pretty much summed it up. He's a dynamic weapon who's got a serious chip on his shoulder that is out there to prove to people that he is worthy of a spot, despite the size of the college that it comes from. So he's going to come in day one, and he's going to try and make his mark.
Yeah, this seems to me like a real classic Dan Campbell pick.
Yeah, I agree. Right, let's move on to Ryan's third round pick, which is Brady Christensen at 101, offensive tackle from BYU, the number 1 ranked PFF tackle in 2020. Ryan?
Yep. Where I look at it now is I've worked on the offense and defense. Now is time to address the line because we've still got quite a few questions, I feel, depth-wise. He played primarily at left tackle, but his career projection, his draft projections at right tackle. He's got the IQ to play multiple positions, and that includes guard. Guard is an issue on the right side because we don't know how Logan Stenberg's going to pan out. We don't know. Vitae was probably an expensive mistake. He can help take some relief and some pressure off Crosby. He has got the size. He's 6'6". He's a man mountain and he likes to dominate. He's explosive. He's powerful. Once he gets hands on people, he's going to stop them. And I think he could well be off the board by now. He is that bigger prospect, I feel. So if he falls here, I'll be very impressed. He'd be a great value pick. He's got limited athletic ability. So anyone that's extremely fast around the outside may be able to catch him off. But I feel like he has got the ability to learn to deal better with faster guys. He's got the IQ and the mental capacity to learn the position and move across to guard if needs be, which is where I'm going to try project and play him.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if he's available here, but if he is, it's an absolute steal. I know PFF are kind of low on him in the 150s, and the Draft Network have him in the 60s, so there's a big disparity in where people think he's going to fall. Yeah, but if we can get him a 101, I think that'd be terrific. I'd kick him inside to right guard. If I'm honest, I think that's where he's going to live.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Either way, even if he's providing relief for Crosby in year 1 or at right guard, perhaps knocking Vitae to the bench, I think it would be a good pick. All right, we'll round off round 3 with Ant's third round pick at 101, and I think we've been tipped off as to who this is. No, Quinn Meinerz, interior offensive line from UWW.
Yeah, so I said earlier that a lot of the guys I've picked in my drafts I've already spoken about at length on previous pods, and Quinn Meinerz is one of those guys. So he's the interior offensive lineman from Whitewater, Wisconsin. So Ryan just picked up on it there. The offensive line does have issues when it comes to depth next year, but the one glaring hole we had last season was at right guard. And now I've been sort of carrying the flag for Logan Stenberg this year. I've been waiting for him to break out, waiting for him to get in this team, but I can't ignore all the tidbits coming out any longer that he's struggling and that he might not make it into this team, which is a great shame. So if I'm looking at the line at this point in time and what's available, I'm going to have to go back to the well and try again for a guard. So Quinn Meinerz, he's the guy who you might have seen with his YouTube workouts. He's had the year off this year, running through the forest, carrying gas canisters, just absolutely beefing himself up to high heaven. And if anyone watched the Senior Bowl, Meinerz was one of the best prospects at the Senior Bowl this year. He's the one who took the big leap through there because there were issues to do with some of his technicality, his hand movement, etc. And he was playing against a lot tougher opposition than he had in the past, and there was a lot of noticeable aspects in his games where he just got so much better than what he had before. He's got great hand movement, he's efficient, he's really, really powerful. Now, obviously with a lot, when you're a guy who's got a lot of power, you've got to also have the balance and the movement to be able to use it, because sometimes if you just go barreling in, a good defensive lineman's just going to swat you out the way and get you there and take you out the equation. But I think with a little bit of technical adjustment, with a little bit of the right coaching, he is a guy who's going to be a really good guard at the next level. I mentioned when I talked about him in my draft prospects I was watching on Pro Days, he had a big weight issue when he was younger. Playing college football, he had a real gut on him. They said you're never going to make it in the NFL if you don't change the way you go about, how you train, how you eat. And he's just, his journey to where he's got now has just been unbelievable. He's put in so much work, so much effort. He's very strong. He's very powerful. He is a Dan Campbell guy like Jalen Darden. He's someone who's gonna have a lot to prove, a lot of people to prove wrong. And I think I really want a proper right guard in there. I don't want Vaitai getting shoehorned in again. I think he's gone after this year. I think the only reason they're keeping him in at guard is because of the money that we're paying him. But I just like everything about Quinn Miner's games. As I say, strong hands. He's got athleticism to work in the screen game. He's got lateral movement to, provide run protection. It just needs a little bit of fine tuning. But at pick 101, I want to make a decent investment into that guard spot just to provide some depth. And I'd be absolutely delighted if it was him. So, yeah, Quinn Miner's next pick for me.
I think it'd be an absolute steal there. I actually would be slightly surprised if he's still available there. I know he was kind of vaunted as almost a 5th round pick earlier in the draft season, but he's one that's been rising up boards too. The tape that you mentioned of his training is absolutely outstanding. I think he's going to be a victim of the lower standard of play that he's been at Wisconsin Whitewater. But I think his level of production is going to far exceed that in the NFL. I think he comps better in the NFL than he does at college, if I'm honest.
Yeah, exactly. I think value, we're going to get really good there.
All right, we're going to move on, and I'm going to go back to back for you, Ant, and start with your first 4th round pick, which is Dwayne Eskridge at 112, wide receiver, Western Michigan, and Michigan heads are going to be familiar with this one.
Yeah, so I mentioned him earlier in relation to Jalen Darden. I've done a lot of tape watching on both these guys. And again, Dwayne Eskridge is the smallest receiver in this draft, if I have my memory correct. But again, this is another guy who has a chip on his shoulder and a point to prove. So his college career, you look at it at first glance, he's played 43 games, but he's only got 121 receptions, 2,244 yards. The highest was only 776 in 2018. 15 touchdowns, but 19 yards per reception, which is really good. And he's also done a little bit of work in the backfield as well as kind of a gadget guy. He averages actually 9.7 yards per carry. So when used effectively, he can be really good in the gadget game. But the reason why his numbers aren't as high is because he initially started out as a defensive back, and he sort of transitioned back and forth between defensive back and wide receiver, in part due to injuries on the Western Michigan roster, and part due to players who were transferring into the program, just meaning there was no room for him to be in, a particular group 1 year. But despite that, despite having to switch positions, he's got high-end production, as you can tell by his yards per reception average. And that was without being able to settle into a position until this final season. But he's really well developed for a guy who's not had as much time there, as a lot of the other guys have. But what he incorporates into his game, and what I really like, he has the mentality of a defensive player as well because of his defensive back work. Now, when Campbell talks about the guys he wants in, doesn't matter whether they're running back, tight end, wide receiver, he wants them to be able to block. And Dwayne Eskridge can do that. I mean, that's one of the staples of his game, is his ability to be able to block as well as be a wide receiving threat. He's got strong hands. His route tree is very seasoned. He's capable of playing on the inside in the slot or on the outside. Again, another guy on special teams who offers you a lot. He's done some punt return. He's done some chasing down of kickoffs. He's a guy who can, if he's not starting straight away, he's giving you a lot on special teams. As I say, his run blocking is really good. His tackling is amazing, actually, for a wide receiver. But again, that's sort of the defensive play he's got there. But as a receiver, he adjusts well to errant throws. He makes difficult catches in really sort of contorted positions. And his concentration is, again, top-notch. He waits till the ball is in his hands and he's gone. But with a guy who's got he's got elite speed as a guy, but he can make receptions in stride as well, which a lot of guys can't do. When you look at your Anthony Schwartzes, they've got all the speed in the world, but they can't make catches when they're absolutely pegging it as fast as they can. It's a good trait to have. And like I say, he's another one of those guys. And I did a lot of, hang on, where are my things here? he's just got a very good all-round game, and he adds the defensive element at the receiving point, which Campbell is going to be looking for. It doesn't matter that he's small. Like Darden, he's a point to prove, and he will prove it. He's got elite speed, and teams are really going to have to adjust to playing him when he gets in space, and he has ability in the gadget game as well in the backfield. So I've not gone big on my receivers, not in the first rounds and that, but adding two guys like Darden and Eskridge, who have got elite speed, and mixing them in with all the gadget guys we have in the middle and the experience of Williams and Perriman, I think that gives us a very, very deadly offense going forward that's going to have a lot of speed, and it's going to be really difficult to play against. So to get Eskridge and Darden, I'd absolutely love it.
Yeah, I'd be a fan of that pick. He's another one who's been kind of mocked all over the place. He could go in round 2 if you believe some places, could go in round 5 if you believe others. So God knows where he's going to end up, but electric player, love him. All right, Ryan, your first 4th round pick is Tamorrion Terry, wide receiver, Florida State, and one of your draft crushes at 112.
Yep, I spoke about him, I think, in the first Pro Day video that we did. I feel like this is a wide receiver that, for all his natural talent, his numbers was let down massively at Florida State. He managed to lead the team in 2 years in receiving, and in those years, he averaged 19.8 yards per catch and over 20 every year. He is a burner. He will take the roof off of a defense. He will get in behind, and once the ball's in his hands, he's looking to the end zone, and it's going to be a leg race. And I'm just trying to think, when was the last time the Lions had that? When was there a true speedster that would go for the pylon? And I'm struggling to think. It's been quite a while. I think between bad quarterback play, off the field issues, Florida State letting down, this was a guy that was at LSU or Clemson or Alabama. I'd be talking about him probably half an hour ago, maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round, because I think they'd have proved him a bit better. He has got a big body at 6'3", 200 pounds, so he packs a punch when he gets the ball in his hands. He's raw in his route running, but that's what I like about him. He's one of those players that just needs the right kind of people around him to work on his cuts and his movement, his tree. But laterally, he gives something to the Lions that we've not had in a long time. And for me, that excites me. That gives Jared Goff something to work with. Put it up, down in the corner field, he's going to get there. Once he works on his high point at the pro level with the pro corners, I think he's going to evolve into a really good player, and he's good value in the 4th round.
Any thoughts on Terry, boys?
Yeah, I like him. I know I watched a bit more tape on him after Ryan mentioned him on the Pro Day circuit. There's a lot of guys, receivers in these 3rd, 4th rounds who have been overlooked for one reason or another, whether it be their height, whether it be the play of the team they were on, not really sort of specifically translating to them as players. And he's another one. If we get him there, I think we could have a steal. Again, you don't need to go big in this draft on wide receiver to get great value for the position. So he's another one. I'd be happy if we got him, if we didn't get the 2 I have.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to move on to my first 4th round pick. And that is, at 112, Seth Williams, wide receiver from Auburn. My comp for him is Kenny Golladay. I think this is a direct, like-for-like replacement for Kenny Golladay. Not the fastest off the line of scrimmage, isn't the best with his feet initially at the line. He can learn that. But he has an elite mid-speed. What I mean by that is that in his RAS, he's 3.2 in the 10 split, but up to 8.3 in the 20 split. And I'm not quite sure how you can run that fast in the 10 to 20 range to be able to be like awful at one and amazing at the other. But he's just a little bit slow to start, but he's electric in that middle area. But what sets him apart is he has elite explosion. He can jump very high. He can jump very far. He's 6'3". He's 210, 211, so he's a reasonable receiver, but he is an elite catcher. He's a red zone threat. He's going to be a natural X receiver. And if you have a look at some of the receivers we have already, I think he's a complement to them already. So I think that's going to be position of need X that's going to slot in straight away and be good in specific roles initially and eventually good as an every down back at the X. Any thoughts on Williams?
You had me at red zone threat. That
sounds good to me.
I know they've his running buddy there, Schwartz, has been in the eye of the Lions. I know they've interviewed him a few times. I don't know if they've done anything with Williams, but I know their eyes are focused on Auburn, so it could be a choice.
It could be a choice. The thing with the other one that you just mentioned, which Schwartz, is he's an absolute burner who is a track star on a football field.
Yeah, and he can't do anything else.
He can't do anything else. Whereas Seth Williams can do the catching element of it. And if you're going to offer me one for year one, I want someone who can catch, not someone who can run. And I mean, he can run. Just don't ask him to run in the first 5 yards.
Oh no, I agree with you. I agree with you for sure. It's just the ones who the Lions have interviewed. I don't know if they see something there, but possibly they do, possibly they don't.
All right, let's move on to Steve's fourth rounder. And that is Robert Hainsey, offensive tackle, Notre Dame.
Yeah, so after taking Chase with my first pick, I've picked 4 defense players for the next 4 picks. And this is my only other offensive pick in this draft. Before Ant gets emotional, I'm not writing off Tyler Crosby. Absolutely not.
That's fine. At that pick, it's more a rotational guy. It's not a straight up replacement, so you're fine.
Exactly. Crosby's fine. Haynes is 6'4", 302 pounds. He's been super consistent for Notre Dame, playing at right tackle over the last 4 seasons. A real good technician. Tons of power. You know, he's everything that you would want from an offensive tackle. Top 30 run blocking grade according to PFF in 2020. You know, we need to absolutely make sure that we unlock Swift and Kerryon Johnson this season, and we just need someone that can make those blocks and open up those holes. And you know, I mean, Hainsey, I think when we get down to this level, we are taking a punt. His RAS is only 8.06. So he's kind of, I think, maybe like 15th to 20 in his class. But if, you know, a player like that at 112, I think in my mock, Brady Christensen went around about the 70 position. So, you know, if you want a tackle at this point, Christensen's probably off the board. So Robert Hainsey, I thought, was a good pick at that number.
Yeah, I'm with you there. At the end of the day, the odds say that one of your tackles is going to get injured. Is Matt Nelson the relief that you want there? And I would argue that he's someone who can fill in for a couple of games, maybe at a pinch slightly more, but I think you want to take more swings. Now, Nelson has room for improvement. He's only played at the position for a couple of years, but it doesn't hurt to get into more competition, so I'm right behind this pick.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm behind it as well. My thing with Crosby is I want him to be given the opportunity to earn that right tackle spot in his contract year, because I think his play last year warranted it. You know, we said too many players didn't progress last year. He was one of the few who did, and those are the players you have to reward. You have to give them chances. It's part of your culture. You work hard, you progress, you'll get an opportunity. But that doesn't mean that I won't take a guy, because I've done it myself, a bit further down, who will come in, will provide some competition and be a rotational backup. I think we absolutely need to do that. But I think Crosby deserves a chance to make that right tackle spot his own this year. That's the only thing I have with him.
All right, let's move on to your 5th round pick, Steve. And that is Daryl Slayton, interior defensive lineman of Florida at 153.
Yeah, so we're now officially in big fella territory. 6'5", 340 pounds. RAS score 7.96, so he's 14th in his class for defensive tackles. Size is great. I think the issue is the question mark on his RAS was over his agility. But, you know, super size for a defensive lineman. He's going to be a matchup problem for a lot of the kind of shorter guards. You know, he's this is a guy who's like a nasty, mean guy, and has got that like aggressive streak. Maybe not the most refined in terms of technique, but he's got that kind of aggression that I think makes him ticks the Dan Campbell kneecap biting box. Playing at Florida, 38 tackles in 11 games, 3.5 for loss, 1.5 sacks. He's he's a punt, but that the interior of our defensive line has been a problem for a while, because it's just been, there's not much been happening there. And Brock is coming in. I'm sure he's going to provide something, but is he a long-term answer? I don't know. I think Brock is 30. The potential for injury is there, and with these big guys, let's get some strength and depth, and hopefully this could be the guy.
Sounds a bit like Danny Shelton, where you say he's got that raw power inside, but lacks sometimes the technique.
Mhm.
Danny Shelton, like you say, he's a guy that will swallow up. He will pick on weaker, smaller guys in front of him. He's not always the most refined, so that works for me. It's a competition for Pinasina. Like you say, Brockers could be a rental, so strengthening the interior will help outside.
Yeah,
I think if you're looking at defensive tackle, I think that dipping down late into the draft is the way to go this year, because I saw a quote from a NFL scout the other day who says he reckons this is the worst defensive tackle class in years. He doesn't rate it at all. So I think, you're almost more chance of finding someone better in the later rounds who's gone under the radar rather than the established options who are in there. So I agree. We should probably have a little dabble late on, see if we can find the guy, because I just don't think there's any there this year who are going to improve you right away.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My final pick in round 5 is Ambry Thomas at pick 153, cornerback from Michigan, 2020 opt-out, 4-star recruit, 6 foot, 189, and he is someone I'm taking a swing at. In round 5, I want someone who can come in with special teams upside. I want someone who can immediately contribute, like you've just had, Steve, on the interior defensive line or offensive line, someone who, like Penasini, can just come in and be a rotational guy. Or I want someone who is a very high upside player who can come in and perhaps over the course of his rookie contract become a starter because of his athletic profile. And Ambry Thomas certainly fits that latter mold. Now, he projects as a nickel cornerback in the pros. He can sometimes be left on an island and doesn't know what to do in terms of his football IQ, but he's a very aggressive, willing tackler, especially in man. He's good against the run. He can be a little over-enthusiastic, and he needs that coached out of him. But his ceiling is very, very high. It depends how teams feel about the fact that he took the year out in the year gone by, considering his production previous to that. But Michigan fans will be familiar with him, so we're bringing him back home. Ambry Thomas, boys, how you feeling?
Always good to see a hometown boy returning to their roots.
I'm sorry, I've not much to add on that one. I don't think my draft knowledge has gone that far down the boards, unfortunately.
I don't know him, but I will say that I've also looked at slot corner, and I do feel like it's a position where we are kind of weak. Like say, Cornell did rank pretty well in his time, but he might not be the long-term answer. So I feel like a potential upgrade there is something that we should be really interested in.
All right, Ryan, let's get to your first 5th round pick. And that is Matt Bushman, tight end out of BYU at 152.
Oh, I love this guy. This guy is going to be my dark horse. I think he'd be a day one starter opposite TJ Hockenson. This guy was robbed of his senior year because of an Achilles injury, but he came out as a freshman, put up nearly 600 yards receiving. Second year as a sophomore, nearly 600. Top 600 in his junior year. He's got 6'5" size, 240 pounds. He is built like you want a tight end to build, and he's a really good passing weapon. He would have given Zach Wilson a huge weapon last year. He would have leveled up BYU even further. He's going to fall because he's coming off a potential injury that could hamper him as a pro. But I do believe that the only thing he needs to work on is blocking. We've got Josh Hill for that. So he's got time to work on his blocking. But as a natural receiver, he's got a very tidy route tree. He's got a big build. He's got a good catch radius. He's going to be a guy that, had he had a senior year, I'd have probably been talking about a while ago, but I think he's someone that I think we should really look at as an opposite to someone that can complement T.J. Hawkinson.
All right, I know nothing about him, so I'm not going to say any more. Anyone have any more comment for Bushman? All right, let's move this on. And your first 5th round pick is Robert Rochelle, cornerback, Central Arkansas, 152.
Yeah, so obviously he's already been mentioned. I know Steve took him a little earlier than I have. Now, I sort of really started focusing on him after, because Ryan had him as one of his 5 prospects to watch after our first Pro Day installment that we had, and I sort of took a bit of notice in him there. And as I've already said, I think we can take a flyer on a guy. He's a developmental guy for sure, but given we have the senior guys, given we have the talented youngsters, I think he's a guy who might be able to fit in well with us this year. So he's a really explosive cornerback. He's got short area burst to rocket out of his hip turns. He's got tremendous closing speed when coming back towards the ball. He's got downfield ability to carry the speed with his man, his receiver. They don't get away from him, and he's got the length to impact the catch point as well. I think the good thing about him is his physical profile gives him a good floor. I think even if he doesn't work out the way you intended, I still think he can be really good as a depth cornerback, and I think he can offer you a lot. But you just look at him in coverage, he's really clever in coverage. He's got understanding of route concepts. He knows where receivers are going to go. He doesn't bite on a route until the receiver's made his move. He doesn't try and, get in there a little early and sell himself out. When he's in zone coverage, he's got positional discipline. Again, he's not going to commit too early. If you've got a lot of these teams who are playing short run after catch plays, he will wait there and he will break it down really quickly before the receiver breaks out big for yards after catch. So I think there's a lot of development there, but in round 5 at pick 152, I think you're going to have guys who are going to need to develop a bit, but you look at his tape and you just see so much good traits to his game. With the right development, he could become as good as Aroarie maybe, and that's going to be a hella good value back there. So yeah, I'd love to, I'm continuing on the defense train. I've sorted out my linebackers. I've put a great safety in there, and now we've got some depth at corner. I think it's a great start to our first year of the rebuild under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes.
All right, we've spoken about Rochelle before, so I'm going to move it straight back on to you, Ant, for your next 5th round pick. Apologies. And that is, and I'll draw this out as long as I can for you, 153, Brendan James, offensive tackle from Nebraska.
Yeah, so as I pointed out a minute ago when Steve made his, tackle option a bit later in the draft, we do need depth there. I'm aware that we need a guy behind Crosby and behind Decker who's able to come in and provide some relief, just like Nelson does. Now, Brendan James, the only reason he sort of piqued my interest is because I've seen the Lions have been interviewing him virtually. He's one of the few players who they've been looking at, but I know James has had interviews with every single team. There's a lot of interest in him because a lot of teams see what I see on his tape, and that is a potentially very talented tackle again, with the right amount of development in the team. His hand usage is really good in pass protection. He keeps the defensive tackles guessing. He's terrific at maintaining blocks. He grabs onto his guy and he sticks with him, and he's very hard to get past as soon as he's got the lock on them. His feet, he can get them to stick in the ground. He's so hard to move, but he's also got good reaction ability if he is beaten by a really good guy. His big problem is his weight. He's very underweight for a tackle, which is why a lot of teams are not taking interest in him till late in the draft, but that's something you can work on over summer. You can plump some more weight on him, and then, his ceiling is going to be really high in the NFL if he's able to do that and he's able to continue developing as he does. But as the main point I've made already, I want Crosby to have that opportunity to become right tackle this year, and James gives us depth behind him and doesn't take the opportunity away from him. But I like what I see with him. I see, a guy who does need to develop, but just like Rochelle before him, there are so many good aspects to his game, which if realized, we'll have a really good player on our hands and a steal in round 5.
All right, let's move on to Ryan's second 5th round pick and the second to last pick of this mock draft. And that's Trill Williams at 153, cornerback from Syracuse.
Yeah, this guy is Robert Rochelle. This guy is going to be slept on, but has got a huge upside. Trillion Williams has lived in the shadow of Ifiatu Melifonwu and Andre Cisco. This guy has played wide receiver, nickel corner, and safety for Syracuse. He's a 3-year starter. He's built like the Slender Man. He's got more length than most people in this draft. He has got long arms, long legs. He's rangy and he's aggressive. He comes from a very good Syracuse defense. He's projected to play inside, and I think he's going to offer supreme value because
I don't know why I'm thinking of Mr. Tickle, Ryan. I'm just thinking Mr. Tickle now.
That's actually fair value. He does offer the actual upside as well. He's one of the best returners in college. 3 return touchdowns in his time at Syracuse. So he goes both ways. He understands offense as well. He's an explosive playmaker. And I think he's going to offer something on both sides of the ball. He just needs a bit of nurturing and a bit of growth. But I think he will be a potential long-time slot nickel corner.
As a side point, how good would Mr. Tickle be as a DB, as a ball hawk? He'd have the range, the arm length to make a big difference. Anyway.
I think Steve's got onto something here. Instead of, your DB trying to wrap your hands around him and bring him down, get under his arm, start tickling him so he drops the ball. There you go. I think Steve's just revolutionized the defensive game here.
Future podcast will make a team out of Mr. Men and Little Women. That'd be watch.
I think I've opened a Pandora's box here.
Yeah. I like Trill Williams very much. I see what you see in him. He could very well be the guy for us moving forwards. I think it's a very good value pick down there.
I hate to break it to you, but I've seen that the Packers have shown a lot of interest in him. They've met him several times, and I think they met him at... I don't know if it's at Senior Bowl. They've met him a lot of times. There's a lot of interest in him.
You're not allowed to.
Up there.
You're not allowed to swear on this podcast.
I don't think he's going to make it that far.
You can say fuck on this podcast, but you can't say the P word. Don't even. We'll move on to our final pick, which is Ant's 7th rounder. He got in the trade with Denver for 7, and it is, to round us off at 237, Brandon Knox, running back from Marshall Athletics.
Yeah, so as part of my original trade back when I did with the Broncos earlier, I thought because we've got no 6th or 7th round picks, I'd want to try and eke one out of them because I think there's a lot of good guys back there, especially in sort of the running backs department. There's a lot of gadget guys, a lot of potential dual threat guys. But I mean, Brandon Knox was one who stood out to me. The Lions went to his pro day at Marshall Athletics. There's a couple of guys there, but he's one of the main guys. He's a very solidly built runner who's got a lot of strength behind him. He's got good contact balance. He's got power when he scampers. He's not really much of a receiving threat, but at this level, he's a really great goal line back, and he gives you something a little different when you're in the red zone if you want to try and throw teams off and throw him in there as a guy. I mean, we've got a lot of good running backs here already, but just for a flyer, I think I just want to get a guy who I can mix in when we're in those 1st and goal situations. Like I say, he's very powerful. He can bulldoze himself over the line. So I just want to take a flyer on him back here, see if we get anything in case Carry On doesn't work out next year and we end up releasing him. I just want to try and see if we can get a guy who might be able to replace him in the short term. He's good at blocking. He's good goal line threat. Give a chance on him, see if he works out.
I don't really like drafting a running back in general, but a 7th rounder I can live with.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. But there's just quite a few guys back there who look slept on. Just, you know, they don't immediately jump off the tape for you, but they're one of those you might be able to land on one of them and get something really good. And I wanted the opportunity to be able to do that. Hence why I eked the extra 7th out of Denver to do so. So yeah, you're sort of guessing when you get to this level. There's only so much tape to watch. There's only so much information you can get about them. But the little bit I have seen, it looks promising. And like I say, we did go to see him, so they will be aware of him. So who knows?
I consider moving back in other rounds, but I thought just for the sake of picks where we are, I don't want to cut my nose to spite my face. I don't want to move back further and potentially miss out on someone to take a later flyer on someone else. So I thought I'm just going to sit with 5 rounds this year.
Yeah, like I said, I think we're in good position. Like in round 2, you can take advantage of the safety group or the wide receiver group. In round 3, if Jabril Cox is there, the linebacker core, you're in a good position to get them. If you were back much later, you may miss out on them. So I agree with you there. There was no thought about ever sort of trading back in any of the other rounds. But one question I did want to quickly ask of all of us here is, who was the one guy you wanted to draft, but he's not in your draft? Whether, you know, you couldn't fit him in or you just decided against it. I was just intrigued to see who didn't make the cut, who you did really want.
I'll start. The one pick is, I don't like going off pro days or workouts, but Jamin Davis, he seems to be in every mock to Detroit right now. He has flown up.
Steve, anyone there who?
I think Rashawn Slater is a really intriguing pick in terms of just the amount of things that he can do and his versatility and just the kind of sheer skill that the guy's got. I'm just really struggling with drafting an offensive tackle when there's just a glaring hole at wide receiver. But I mean, Slater is someone that could be that almost certainly will be there at 7. And you don't want to kind of pass on someone that could develop into kind of one of the greats. And I know there's so much talk about Sewell, but I think people are overlooking Slater, but it just can't be for us this year.
I think for me, the one that I really want to draft every time I go out there and draft is Ardarius Washington in the 4th or 5th, depending on how far he falls. It's because of his size. He's not going to go day 2 because of his size. But because Richie Grant fell to me at 72, I didn't feel like I could double dip as safety. That didn't feel right. So that's the reason why I didn't go for him on this one. But if I had to redo my mock over and I take Pitts and Browning 1 and 2 and Grant doesn't fall to me at 3, I think I'd be looking at him at 101 for sure instead of Roche. So
yeah, my guy was Davis Mills. I'm really high on him, and I think if you're going to draft a quarterback, do it later on to have a developmental guy who sits there. But I just love watching his tape. He's got such a powerful arm. He's got such a clever brain. He just knows what he's doing on a field. And I think he's going to be a really big steal for someone. But I think he's in the 30s scheduled to go, and I just couldn't put him in there because I've gone defense 3 picks. I've got to get wide receivers in there. I've got to get my O-line in there. But I did really, really, really badly want to draft him. But, you know, and I'm not, but just thinking about back to your original one I saw earlier, I'm not really wanting to dob you into Ryan here, but you picked Shaun Wade in your original, didn't you?
I did pick Shaun Wade. It was at I picked Shaun Wade at 112. And the reason that I picked Shaun Wade there was I thought that he has bust potential if you pick him day 2. But I think that if you never place him outside corner, if you say to him, you're our slot guy, and, you know, just try not to fuck it up, that he might be able to recapture some of his 2019 form. And the 2019 tape is good, but the 2020 tape is atrocious. And which one are you going to get? Well, at 112, I'll gamble on 2019. At 72, I'm not going anywhere near him.
I was just waiting to screenshot the look of disgust on Ryan's face when you made that pick, and I'm disappointed you cut him out.
I think the issue is someone, like Wade, is that when you've been burned so often on the outside as a corner, like there must be some kind of like mental scar tissue there in terms of the season he's had, and you kind of wonder whether, players can refine that, discover that form when they've just had an absolute nightmare. So, especially in that step up to NFL. So I think he's one that has got intriguing, in terms of his potential, but just wouldn't want to risk him.
Yeah, I'm with you. Is there anything that you guys want to change from your draft? So we already talked about someone that you missed out on or liked drafting, but is there, looking at who you've drafted, the position groups that you've drafted, is there something where you're like, I'm happy with what I did, but I'm still worried about this? Or, I made a bad pick, but I was kind of happy with overall, so I left it, or anything like that at all?
I think we've got that many holes that it's going to be impossible to be fully satisfied doing a draft, because I think there's just so many ways you can go about doing this rebuild, and there are many ways that you can go about it. For me, I'm happy with mine. I've gone all defense straight up because I think that is the issue here, and I don't want to be trying to fix the one position on offense we're struggling with when the defense is so far behind and needs a lot more upgrading than the offense does. But I've still got two great wide receivers in my view, in mine, two great outside guys who are just going to cause so many issues. I think for me, I've upgraded the really bad areas, but I've also upgraded the offense as well. And I would stick with that. And I hope that we do get a few more picks on draft night to be able to do so.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out in terms of getting the trade with Denver. I'd be solving the wide receiver issue and giving Goff that help with Chase, I think, is a massive tick. And then I've focused very much on the defense. Owe on the edge, Browning at linebacker, Grant at safety, Rochelle at corner. I think those are four really good kind of like throws at the dartboard of solving major positional problems on our defense. And then a late round offensive tackle and a late round defensive lineman punt, which, these are always going to be long shots when you take them in the later round. So if the Lions end up with something looking like that, I'll be very happy.
Brian, you happy?
I'm happy. The only thing I'll change is if I get to round 3 and Andre Cisco is on the board, I will take him over Divine Diablo because he has spent more time as a natural safety and he has got better hands. He is more of a ball hawk, so he's the only one I'll swap if he's there.
For my part, I am concerned with my draft. Now, I said to you before that I picked what I thought the Lions would do, not necessarily what I would do. I would take the trade down depending on the deal on offer. If I was offered Steve's deal of 7 for 9 and 40, I would take it in a heartbeat. I don't think they will do that, and so I let the board fall as it did. And I've got backup now at cornerback, safety, and linebacker, an edge on defense, and I've taken a wide receiver who's a situational player and a tight end who's a matchup nightmare. I think those are all good things, but I think something in terms of my philosophy that you should do pretty much every draft is try and take someone on the O-line and the D-line, whether that's depth or starter. I'd like to see one on either side of the line in almost every single draft. I think it's one of those places where you see injuries a lot, that you need depth there, that they help out on special teams quite often, and sometimes they're kind of where you can find the hidden gems, especially in the later rounds, and I haven't taken one of them. And that just concerns me. It means perhaps that we're taking some guys on UDFAs in those positions, which I don't think is where the value is for those players. I think rounds 4 and 5 are pretty good. So I like where I went with Williams and Thomas in round 4 and 5, but I would have liked more picks.
Matt, all I'm going to say is you've had weeks to do this and you've done about 400 mock drafts. So if you're disappointed, then maybe the GM role isn't for you. Okay, so I don't want to be the Lions harbinger of doom here. So here's a question for you. What for you is the worst case scenario of what we actually do on the night in terms of how things pan out for round one? What's, we took the other day about how could we fuck this up? What's the scenario that you think could play out worst for us?
I think we know what Ant's going to say.
No,
Seven.
I'm no, not at 7. Our worst, the worst thing that could happen to us is that we trade back into a position where we sort of lose a lot of the available options. Like if we trade back to 15 and Owusu Koromoa's not there, all of a sudden I look at the availability of who's around and it's a bit too high to be going on the next level of wide receiver. My good linebackers have gone and there's not anyone else I really want to go at 15. I think where we're at, and if you're a little bit earlier, there's good value for players you want, but I think there's some spots in the first round where we ain't going to get as much value for money as where we are. So I think that's the bad situation. But if we do stay at 7, then it's drafting Trey Lance.
For me, it is where the Falcons stay where they are and don't take a quarterback, where Fields is taken at 3 and the 2 remaining quarterbacks are Lance and Jones, and no one wants to trade up to get them. A lack of good trade-up offers and skilled players going before us. My nightmare scenario at 7 is taking Micah Parsons. Simply because I do not think that at 7 he provides the value we need. Now, it's going to be a good pick, but it's not value. And if there are those 2 quarterbacks on the board, we need to trade down. And if we do not get the offers, that's the nightmare, where we need to trade down and we can't.
I think my nightmare scenario is taking any wide receiver not called Jamar Chase at 7. If we took someone like Jalen Waddle,
Oh,
at 7,
Waddle, I want
would
him so
go
much.
absolutely bonkers.
I want you on stream if we do it, because that is someone I really want at 7.
You could literally get him between like 7 and 14. Like, I think you could move back fair few picks and get someone like Jalen Waddle. But no, if we take someone that not called Chase at wide receiver at 7, I'll be very unhappy because there's no need.
I mean, did you see the graphic of the wide receivers taken in the top 15 in recent years? It's grim reading.
Yeah,
it is a risk. There's not many who have worked out thus far.
But that's when people take like Judy and Henry Ruggs ahead of Jefferson. That's I think it's bad drafting rather than the prospects. So my nightmare scenario, which just disturbs my sleep and leaves me in a cold sweat. I think there is going to be some trade action. My worry, and I think someone like Denver would be ideal because at 9 we can still get one of the top targets. My worry is you've got Washington at 19 and the Bears at 20, who I can see both would be really up, potential to trade up for a quarterback if Fields or Lance they think is going to be around at 7. Fitzpatrick at Washington looks to me like an ideal QB mentor for a new raw prospect. So if we trade down to 19 or 20, particularly 20 with the Bears, and the Bears then get their quarterback, and we then take a player, and it's actually a player I've drafted, but someone like Owe, take him at 20, and then he turns out to be a bust, I think that's the nightmare scenario. So for me, that's absolutely what I don't want to see.
I can definitely see that. But I think my dream scenario is really not too far away from that scenario either. I can see us trading down to 20 with the Bears for as many first-round picks as they can give. I don't know, 3, let's say, because they want a Trey Lance. Trey Lance is not ready for 2 years, and when he is ready in 2 years, they haven't got any quality players to pair him with, so they're still awful. We have all their picks, and they've been awful. So we are stocked to the brim with good players, and we completely obliterate the Bears for the next 5 years. And I think those 2 scenarios are quite close to the line. We can pick very badly at 20 and pick very well at 20, but if we could get Rashad Bateman at 20, I think he has the potential to be the second best receiver in this class. So it really depends who we pick in that position, but it's more of a boom or bust scenario than we have at 7 or 9 for sure.
I agree with Matthew. It's two sides of the same coin. If you pick at 20 and your draft pick's terrible, but we've got at least 2 or 3 first picks, I don't care. Like, so what? We made a mistake. But if we pick at 20, we get a brilliant player and we still get 2 or 3 firsts in the trade. Fantastic. Like you say, it's one of them things. I'll be upset if the pick doesn't work out, but
I don't know whether Bateman would be there at 20.
Ooh.
Yeah, I agree with you. He might not be there at 20. There's some draft boards for sure that have him in their top 3 or top 2 wide receivers, but I'm pretty sure there are some that have him well outside that, and there are so many quality players in this draft that if he went top 15 or if he fell out of the first, I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, his consensus pick on NFL mock draft is 19. But, you know, when you've got, you know, like kind of the Chargers, the Raiders, the Dolphins, who might trade down from Chase at 6 and want to pick a wide receiver lower. I think there's quite a few teams that could take Bateman like earlier. So it's just so difficult to predict. And I kind of think that's why we should just make our pick at 7 or 9 if we get the opportunity. And because picking at 20 has just got so many risks attached.
I'm with you, Steve. I think I'm probably the only Lions fan who doesn't care about getting more first-round picks next year. We are a rebuilding team and we need elite talent at some stage. You can't just keep kicking the picks down the line. I mean, Miami had 3 first-round picks last year. Tua ain't really working out so well so far. The offensive tackle has quit the game already. Wilson, was it? He's had so many issues with them. So that's, you know, it's no guarantee that having
that was
3
the Titans.
first-round
Yeah,
picks.
that's Isaiah Wilson was the Titans. He moved to Miami for a 7th rounder and then quit the same week.
It's no guarantee, though, that you're going to land on those picks. We need, if the talent's there now, take it. Don't keep kicking the can down the road going, oh, yes, let's draft more picks. Because then when you've got more draft capital, you're more likely to get screwed out of it by someone, you know, wanting a lot more money from you. If you're trying to trade up for a quarterback, for example, they'll rinse the house with you if you know you've got that many picks on there. I'd just rather this be a multi-year rebuild where we try and get, you know, do a little bit each year, not just stick in 15 rookies in 1 year and go, right, we're going to be good now. I'd rather do it over a few.
So my thought on that generally, and maybe we'll make this the last one before Ashley's question and then we'll wrap up, is they need to go in with a plan. And the plan could well be, we're not planning to tank, but we're not going to be as good as we can be this year, not on purpose, but this could be the GM hat on. I don't care about picking at 7, because if that gives us another couple of wins, then that harms our pick position next year, and I hate that point of view. But if you pair it with, we're going to trade down twice in the first, and accumulate an extra first and an extra second next year, as well as a couple of picks this year, more bodies, time for the coaching staff to bed in their scheme, and then 3 first-round picks and 2 or 3 second-round picks next year and 3 third-round picks next year, or something like that. Next year, with all the cap space we're going to have as well, we could do something like the Patriots are trying to do now and throw all the money at free agents and all high top-end talent next year. You're looking at, instead of having an average year this year and potentially an average year next year, a poor year this year, and a potentially game-breaking year next year. I mean, go in with a plan. Just decide what you're going to do and execute. Anyway, quickly, Ashley on WhatsApp had a question before we came on, and I just wanted to mention it before we sign off. So he asked about the merits of taking tight end Tommy Tremble in the mid to late rounds. I'm going to throw it over to Ant because you picked him as your comp for... Can't remember who it was on
Kittle.
Yeah.
I think there's merit to taking him there. I think there is a lot of upside with Tommy Tremble. Right now, he's a blocker. He's a really good blocker who you use as a 6th lineman on plays, but he has the potential to be good in the passing game as well. It's just Ian Book's bloody awful at Notre Dame, and it is on tape that he has the route running ability. He's got in space at times, and Buck just hasn't used him. So I think if the Lions were to take a flyer on him in the 4th or the 5th, which is where I think he'll represent good value. But we do already have our blocking tight end in Hill. Right now, he doesn't offer us anything different than what we have already got. But in the long run, he could be a very solid addition, and I think he's got a very high ceiling in the league. So there is certainly some merit to taking him for sure. But personally, I wouldn't have him on my draft board just because of need at the moment. He's not something for me that we need. Obviously, everyone needs a kill, but it depends on him turning into that.
Yeah, totally with you on that. Nothing more to add, really. Anyone else?
All I'd say on Trumbull is I believe we've tried a tight end with drop issues, and we know how that story ended.
Oh, the drop. All right. Our next podcast is going to be this time next week. It's not a full podcast. It's only a mini one pre-draft. That's Tuesday, the 27th of April. Expect that to be in the half an hour range, just to bring you up to date on all the news and perhaps any trades that might have gone down in between now and then. And the reason for that is the NFL draft is next weekend. We are going to be live for at least 20 hours, and we are thinking of adding another couple of agony and sections to that. I don't know. Ant's got a new job and potentially a new flame, so I don't know how available he's going to be for that one. But
We'll go for Ant.
it's all coming up, Ant.
I'm gonna try and add in the extra time if anyone wants to. I've got my Mike Mayotte board going, so I'm gonna try and guess as many picks as I can. So, come at me. I'll try my best.
Yeah, Sodanaz just thanked us for answering the questions, and thank you, man, for watching, and thanks to Aaron for coming in as well. We love you, man. That wraps this one up, but we will see you for Tuesday and then the draft. Hit us up on our socials if you like this one. YouTube, it's Roar the Lions UK. Twitch, ROTR_UK. On Facebook, got the page, which is Roar the Lions UK. Or the group, which is Detroit Lions Fans UK One Pride Worldwide. There you'll see giveaways I mentioned earlier in the pod. On Twitter, it's ROTL_UK, and Instagram, ROTL.UK. We have draft analysis and potential picks at all positions of need at RoarForLionsUK.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you ask us a question there, we will get back to you. It remains for me to thank our regular guests Ryan and Steve, my co-host, and Matthew Turner. We will see you next week. Let's go Lions, one pride.
One pride.
All right, there we go. On mute now. Yeah. Yeah, it would be insane if we could actually even get close to the mark, really.